You're gonna need a couple of minutes.
Roger. Roger's the last one. And he's the last one.
Good.
I'd like to call this December 21st meeting of the Raritan Township Zoning Board of Adjustment to order. The notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied by the placing of a notice of this meeting on the bulletin board at the municipal building, filing same with the township clerk, and transmitting same to the Hunterdon County Democrat, the Courier News, the Star Ledger, and the Trenton Times. Roll call, Taylor.
Chairman, Mr. Roger Aaron's.
Here.
Vice Chairman Cynthia Schaefer. Here. Mr. Steve Farcio.
Here.
Mr. Randy Block.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ferrero. He is asked to be excused. Vice Chair Pro Tem, Ms. Rasul Damji.
Yeah.
Ms. Lindsay Cool Brangel. Here. Board Professionals, Board Attorney, Mr. John Drill.
Here.
Township Planner, Mr. Jeffrey Vaccarella.
Here.
Board Engineer, Mr. Mark Katriniak.
Here.
Traffic Consultant, Mr. Jay Troutman.
Here.
Board Planner, Ms. Jessica Caldwell. She is asked to be excused. Township Landscape Architect, Mr. John Morgan Thomas.
Here.
And Board Stenographer, Ms. Jackie Clapp.
Could I hear a motion to excuse Jim Ferraro? So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Chairman, Mr. Roger Aaron's.
Yes.
Vice Chair, Ms. Cynthia Schaefer.
Yes.
Mr. Randy Block.
Yes.
Mr. Steve Farcio.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pro Tem, Ms. Rasul Damji.
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay Cool Brangel.
Yes.
Okay, since this is the last meeting of 2023, the chairman has some comments. Since this is the last zoning board of adjustment meeting for 2023, it seems only appropriate to make a few comments before we close out the year. Over the course of the last year, we have held a total of 23 meetings and have heard a total of 22 applications. That, of course, doesn't seem like a heavy workload until you realize that most of those applications were heard over the course of as much as a year, with as many as seven different meetings. In all, 14 applications were approved, while 2 were denied, and there was 1 dismissal. Throughout all of these meetings, I can confidently say that the members of the Raritan Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, all of whom are unpaid volunteers, accomplished our goal of balancing reasonable residential and commercial growth against the preservation of the township's bucolic environment. This would not have been possible without the hard work of the people who sit on this dais before you. As we close out this year, I would like to thank each of our board members, Cynthia Schaefer, Rasul Damji, Randy Block, Steve Farcio, Jim Ferraro, and Lindsay Cool Brangel. I'd also like to thank our esteemed board attorney, John Drill, and our board experts, without whom it would be difficult to accomplish what we do at each meeting. Jeff Vaccarella and Taylor Vaughn, our planning office staff, have been indispensable to our efforts. Last but not least, I would also like to thank Jacqueline Clapp, our transcriptionist, for her service. I thank you all, and I wish you all the happiest of holidays. Sincerely, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Roger.
Okay, no announcements tonight. Distribution and correspondence, we have none, but we do have a set of minutes. I've been through the minutes, and Jackie, I must say, you've made a big error. Page 2, and you may never be forgiven for this, Jackie. On page 2, it says Mr. Drill's name. However, it says Drills, not Drill. So
I forgive her.
very good. Anybody else notice anything else? Could I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Roll call.
Wait, who seconded it?
Randy Block.
Vice Chair, Ms. Cynthia Schaefer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pro Tem, Ms. Rasul Damji.
Yes.
Mr. Randy Block.
Yes.
Mr. Steve Farcio,
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay Cool Brengel.
Yes.
And that was the only error that Jackie made as usual. All right. John, I'd like to call the fourth application first, if I could. And I would like to read a letter from Steve P. Gruenberg, the attorney. It's addressed to Taylor Vaughn, secretary.
But first, call the case first.
Yes, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is BOA case number 16-2023. The applicant is REEP RTL Flemington NJ LLC. The location is block 38, lot 1. The address 325 Highway 202. The application is a D variance for a proposed Target retail store. And as I started to read the letter, it says, "Dear Taylor, in furtherance of my email this morning, in light of the fact that there are 3 applications prior to our application scheduled this evening, and we only just received some of the professional reports, we would request that this matter be continued to the board's next available hearing date and hopefully placed on at the beginning of the agenda. Kindly confirm that the date is January 18, 2024, as previously scheduled, or hopefully earlier, and that an announcement will be made this evening so that new notice of hearing will not be required. This will confirm that the applicant extends the time period for the board to act on this application to March 31, 2024. Sincerely yours, Stephen P. Gruenberg."
What's the date on that letter?
Yes, the letter is dated December 21, 2023.
And does the board have anything on its 2 January agendas?
Well, originally they were given the 18th of January. They
Oh.
asked to be on tonight. So they do have the 18th.
Oh, so what did their notice say?
Their notice said tonight.
Okay, so January 18th seems to be the date to give them.
Mhm.
So then we'll make an announcement unless anyone on the board has a problem with this, that, first of all, is anyone here in the audience on REEP RTL Flemington, New Jersey LLC, which is the application for a D variance for a proposed Target retail store? No one's raising their hand, and there are a lot of people in the audience, just for the record. So we'll make an announcement that the hearing on that application is going to be continued, actually not continued, adjourned to January 18, 2024, without need for further notice.
All right. Our second application for the evening is BOA case number 19-2022. The applicant is Fieldstone at Flemington LLC. The location block 40, lot 3 and the address is 57-59 Voorhees Corner Road. The application is a proposal of a 2-story self-storage building. Good evening, council.
Good evening.
And what the agenda doesn't say, but the relief they are seeking is
A D4 variance as it relates to the floor area ratio, which is why this board is vested with jurisdiction,
Right.
as well as some bulk variances.
Can you just enter your appearance on the
Sure.
record?
Good evening, members of the board. Matt Flynn from Savo Shock in Somerville, here representing the applicant Fieldstone at Flemington LLC. We were last before the board on July 20th and are now here to continue our application in a second night of hearings. By way of a brief refresher, and we did just say this, the application is for preliminary and final major site plan approval for the construction of a 2-story self-storage facility, which is a permitted use in the B2 zone. Subject lot is designated as block 40, lot 3, better known as 57-59 Voorhees Corner Road in the township. And again, although this is a permitted use, the board is vested with jurisdiction because we do need a D4 variance as it relates to the proposed floor area ratio for the facility. At the last meeting, you heard from actually 3 of our witnesses, Craig Stiers, our engineer who's seated to my left, James Dankovich, our architect, and also Arthur Corsini, a principal of the applicant. We left that meeting with some homework from the board, with some requested changes to the plans and follow-up items to be provided. And we have endeavored in good faith to supply all of that to the satisfaction of the board's questions at the last hearing, as well as the comments from your board professionals. Few changes to the plans, which will be elicited in testimony, is a shifting and moving of the proposed facility, which results in a reduction in the proposed floor area ratio modestly, as well as decreasing the amount of relief that we needed from one of the setback variances that we require. So tonight, I have our full slate of witnesses. I will recall Mr. Stiers and Mr. Dankovich to just go over the proposed changes to the plans from the last time you heard our application. We also have Gary Dean from Dolan and Dean, our traffic expert, who will describe the traffic impact of the proposal. And batting cleanup will be our planner, Beth McManus, who will go through the proofs required for the variance relief we seek tonight. And we do have a representative from the applicant, Mr. Corsini, here for questions if necessary. So unless there are any legal questions from the board, I would ask to call Mr. Stiers and of course remind him that he is under oath.
Yeah, I just want to do one thing. Gary Dean has not been sworn in yet, because he wasn't here last time. I just want to swear him in now so I don't forget.
No problem.
Everyone else has been sworn in. So can Mr. Dean come up to that center microphone? Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, identify yourself for the record.
Certainly. Gary Dean, D-E-A-N.
And you're the applicant's traffic engineering expert, correct?
That is correct.
And Matt, I would just like to state for the record, Mr. Steve Farcio was not present at the July meeting, but he has reviewed the tape recordings. So he is now eligible to vote on this application.
Okay, has he signed the certification yet?
I have.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank
Counselor,
you.
before we get started, we have 3 applications tonight. To be fair to all of those, we're going to limit you to 45 minutes. If in fact the second or third applicants, if we don't finish tonight, after the 45 minutes, we'll come back to you after we hear the other 2 applications, allowing them the same amount of time.
Okay, understood. Okay. Okay. Mr. Stiers, just a reminder again that you are and remain under oath. And you were qualified as an expert in the field of professional engineering. Do all of your professional licenses remain current?
Yes.
Okay. So I would ask that the board accept him as an expert in the field of
We
engineering.
will accept this witness.
Thank
Yes.
you. Mr. Stiers, why don't you give the board a brief refresher of the site plan as discussed in the last hearing, and then move to the changes that we've made to the plan since that you were last in front of the board.
Okay, I think some of the things that, first off, at the last meeting, if you recall, the property is a triangular piece of property. And what, lack of a better term, the right-hand leg or the southerly leg, it was discussed and determined that that would be a rear yard. And we moved forward from there. The building at that time was just over 30 feet from that setback, rear yard setback. Another discussion point, John Morgan, Thomas brought up that the hedgerow along that same line, we did not locate them. So since that time, our field surveyors have located all those trees and they've been added to the plans. Subsequent to that, kind of finishing that statement is, we did update the plans. We were expected to come back in October. So we had a line on there for the limit of clearing and limited disturbance. Since then, we have moved that limited disturbance further from that property line. So it's essentially a 15-foot setback to the limited clearing and limited disturbance to preserve those trees.
Just for the record, there were 2 plan revisions in. There was a plan revision dated October 3, 2023. And then there was a plan revision dated November 30th, 2023.
Yes, correct.
So which plan revision which plan revision moved the building?
The October plan revision.
Okay, so what revisions were picked up by the November 30th revision?
So if I can keep leading into this one.
Okay, all right.
So from the July meeting to what we expected the October meeting was, as we discussed, the board would prefer to see a greater setback from that rear yard, which is what we did. We increased the setback from 30 feet to just over 40 feet. So when we pulled the building forward, if you see the plan, there's a appendage going towards Voorhees Corner. So when we shifted the building forward, that leg shifted over. So that was really the only real configuration of the building. The look, the architecture is all the same. The other thing that we discussed was the original plans had 29 physical parking spaces on the plans.
31. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 31 feet, right?
It was 31.
I believe you went from 20 to 30.
20.
Can you check your plan?
Yep.
Unless they did that on the November 30th plan, but the October 3 was 31.
I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. I stand corrected. I was looking at the side. yard.
21 to 31, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
So from 21 feet to 31 feet. That's correct.
that's why I was confused on.
Yeah,
this. Okay.
sorry about that. Also, when we talked about the parking, we had originally 29 physical parking spots. And as Jeff pointed out, it's a mini warehouse, so the demand for the parking is a lot less. So as we discussed with the board, we reduced the parking from 29 to 15 parking spaces, which meets the ordinance for the mini warehouse. Additionally, we had 2 loading spaces in the front of the building to meet the ordinance. We discussed that with the board, and just from the operations of the facility, we felt that wasn't needed. So we eliminated those 2 loading spaces and provided a parking space for the company moving vehicle. So as you can see on the current plans, what I call the motor vehicle surface area, the parking area, the driveways is much less than what it used to be. I think the other discussion was, again, the trees and some of the landscaping. And then the other big one was this was just after the implementation of the new stormwater rules. And Mark brought up the fact whether it needs to comply with the new rules or not. So that's kind of where we put the brakes on everything, because neither Mark or I knew, because it was 3 days after the implementation. So we, from that point, went back, made a determination after looking at the rules and consulting with Mark as well as Mr. Drill, that the new rules did not apply to this application. So we moved forward with that.
And let me just interrupt you. That was because the application was deemed complete prior to the adoption of the rules.
Correct, and it's also not a residential project, so
Right.
it's kind of twofold. So the other thing was, along the same lines with the stormwater, was additional testing, groundwater testing for the detention basins. So we did that. That led us to October, where your professionals did an updated review, and Mark pointed out some additional questions pertaining to the stormwater, groundwater testing. So subsequent to that, and that's why we pushed off from October, was to do additional soil testing to reclassify the soils that they do not recharge. We did that. Because they don't recharge, it took us a while to complete the testing. And that's when we submitted the plans at the beginning of November. No,
End of
end
November.
end of November. So that's where we bring ourselves today. We submitted in time 3 weeks before the meeting. Your professionals have updated their reviews based on these most current reviews, especially Mark's. And I appreciate, him working with us and getting, enabling to get this testing done. But it looks like his review is, we have a couple conditions left, but we would comply with them. I think they're just miscellaneous things it's more housekeeping than anything else. And then also with Mr. Thomas, I did speak to him about the landscaping, and again, I think it's just a little bit more housekeeping than anything else. There will be plan changes, and I think it's more just to document the number of trees on the site and the number of trees to be replanted off-site. And I think we will again comply with those comments and work with Mr. Thomas to resolve any of those comments.
What do you mean replanted off-site?
With that?
You said you were going to clarify the number of trees to be replanted off-site.
So the issue was they have replacement trees on the ordinance.
Right.
The locations on the plan, one, they didn't make it clear which trees planted on the site were the replacement trees, so that's something that needs to be clarified. Two, it also made reference to the P and blue road, which we have not been accepted.
Right.
And
Right.
so the trees will be, there needs to be a new table, and it'll describe which replacement trees are being put on the site, which replacement trees are going to be provided off-site in the locations designated by the.
And we will do that stipulating to the report of your landscape architect and also comply with any recommendations on the sites off-site that need the replacement plantings. And of course, we'll update the table accordingly. We're happy to comply. We're happy to comply with the report and the recommendations of Mr. Thomas. We also fully stipulate to the conditions mentioned in the Ferrero engineering report. If the board would like, we could go through them. But again, they mostly are technical items that your engineer recommends as conditions of approval. We will comply.
So what you're saying is every recommendation in Mark's report dated December 15, 2023.
Can
You
be a
will-
condition
can
of
be
approval and we
condition of
will
approval.
comply.
I'd appreciate it if you go through those
Sure.
8 conditions of approval. Mark, I think you'd appreciate that too, would you not?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, and just also, one of the other things that the applicant did, I'll just ask Mr. Stires to confirm, is that as part of the stormwater design management changes, they reconfigured the basins because we had some concerns about encroachment into the roadway right of way, so they've since reconfigured the basins so to eliminate those encroachments. So the basins are wholly contained on the subject property now. That's correct, Mr. Stires?
Yes, yes.
So turning to the December 15th Borough Engineering letter authored by the board engineer, Mr. Katariniak. The first page is an introduction. So beginning on page 2, you can see in bold the recommended conditions of approval. Can you sort of describe the recommendation to the board based on the report and confirm on the record that we will comply?
I think we start with 4D, and that's just more of a construction coordination thing with the bollards in front of the columns. Obviously that we agree to that. 1 and 2 down at the bottom pertain to the county conditions, and we will meet those conditions with the county and provide that documentation to the township.
So 4D is a plan revision, and 4I, that's other required approvals, correct?
4D is more of again, kind of a construction, and we have it on the plans, but I think that Mark would like to just make sure it's coordinated during.
Okay, so what's the language of this proposed? Someone give me some language that you're contemplating for a condition.
My recommendation would be
no,
that
go
the
ahead.
condition be that the applicant coordinate with the engineering office to confirm the locations of the roof support columns, drainage downspouts, and protective bollards prior to installation.
I'm going to say see transcript.
Mr. Drill, you were correct on 4I, that those pertain to the county planning board. We obviously accept the outside agency approval as a condition. Mr. Stires, turning to page 3.
Page 3, 6B is again, coordinating with the utility companies to make sure that we have the will serves and all the necessary approvals for the application.
Are you saying that you don't have a will serve?
We do have will serves. We have provided them to the township.
Okay, so Mark, what's this condition?
Okay, so the one issue we have a question with is with the water service. So there's a will serve for the water service. As the board knows, oftentimes the water company dictates that a hot box be provided. The applicant's representation to me, and I.
Yeah, they said it last time. They're not going to need any variance.
Correct. They're not going to need any variance, and that is predicated on the fact that the water company will allow a meter connection internal to the building because they are located roughly less than 100 feet from the roadway, and that's generally the rule of thumb cutoff, but that's not a hard policy to the utility company. But the utility company were to come back here and say, we need a hot box, it has to be here. I think that opens up the possibility.
They're going to have to
for-
come back for a
They're
variance.
gonna have to come back. So the crux of my comment it's outstanding in 6B kind of just highlights that issue. And I think that I have no issue with the water service as shown, the will serve letter is provided, but the caveat that the applicant be so warned that there's a chance that should a hot box be installed, they would have to come back to the.
I mean, the only other thing I would offer is that if the board were to look kindly on this application to roll that potential relief up with the application, should
How are you going to do that? You know where the hot box is going to be, what kind of variance you're going to need?
Well, I mean, we know
Where
that
it's
it's
gonna be?
accessory structure in the front yard.
I understand, but you're going to need probably a front yard
We can't-
setback
we can't
variance. You're going to
quantify
want to
a
know what it
variance.
looks like, how
Okay,
high it
understood.
is.
So then we'll accept that condition, and it's noted that if that's required, then we'll have to come back for a C variance from the board. Moving on to the stormwater management.
Right. The first comment on the bottom, as I discussed, that we did do the testing for the reclassification of the soils. And I believe Mark is just concurring with that.
That's correct.
Conclusion.
Yes. So it's not a required condition. It's acknowledgement now that the applicant is not seeking relief from the BMP requirements.
Moving on to page 4.
Yeah, item 11, which in the bold is on page 4, on the top of the page.
Yep.
Right. On 11, we would have to do some additional computations for Mark that he requested pertaining for this stormwater. We don't believe that'll be any type of change to the plans. It's just more documentation.
Right, that's going to be a condition of revising the stormwater report or updated to include the updated calculations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Next item. It looks like just like a condition of approval for the outside agency, the
yes,
Hunterdon
yes,
County
correct.
Soil Conservation. Obviously, we accept that.
Yes. 18 is to complete the stormwater summary. That is, typically we hold off until everything is approved, and then we will complete that and send it over to Mark. So
Is the stormwater summary a separate document, Mark, or is that part of the stormwater report?
That can be part of the summary report, part of the stormwater report.
Okay.
Yes.
19.
the operation and maintenance manual, I believe.
It has to be recorded. So when the final calculations and components of the stormwater management report are finalized, any changes to that have to be reflected in the O&M manual, and that O&M manual has to be recorded at the clerk's office. That would satisfy the requirements of the stormwater.
And then D is just outside agencies, which we mentioned were the county planning board and the soil conservation district. We stipulate to that.
Yes.
And the Hunterdon County Planning Board.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for going through all 8 of those. Appreciate it.
I guess I'll ask your landscape architect whether he requires a item by item response to your report.
Well, I'm gonna need to know
Or if Mr.
what these
Joe
conditions
requires it.
are gonna be.
Before you get
They're gonna
into
be
that, I
worded.
have a question about stormwater.
Sure.
So Mark, question is more to you. that intersection, 202 and Worris, always gets flooded. It was closed even early morning Monday, last Monday, when we had a major storm. So there's new calculations which they're gonna be presenting. Has there been any consideration of what's going on in that area for the last year? I can even name you personally being there 3 or 4 times this year when it's closed.
The stormwater regulations and the stormwater design do not require the applicant to mitigate an off-site drainage condition. So the applicant's responsibility essentially begins and ends with managing the stormwater on the site proper. So the stormwater measures that are in place will provide some reductions to the peak discharge flows and will provide additional mitigation to the stormwater on the site to reduce any contributing drainage to that intersection, but any other prevailing concerns at the intersection that are not related to this site will not be addressed by this application.
Mark, since the soil won't allow recharge,
Roger, you got to allow her, got to pull that microphone closer to you.
since the soil will not allow recharge, are you comfortable with the size of the retention basins? Do you feel that it will accomplish what Rasul is talking about, that no water will be coming off that site down onto the intersection of 202 and Voorhees Corner Road?
I am. The basins were reconfigured to accommodate the volumes of storm generated on the site. And there were some modifications made to the outfall structures to allow for increased attention for those. So you have under drains now within the basins. There will be some recharge, but there's not recharge of a measurable quantity that would satisfy the BMP manuals. So you have to design it with an under drain. I'd be more concerned, and which is really the requirement for the additional soil requirements, because in the past, if the soil conditions were not clearly identified and basins were designed to recharge and that recharge failed during construction, that's when you ended up with a lot of problems here. So part of the new methodology is that you do much more comprehensive study of the soil conditions. And if you see that that soil cannot handle the recharge, then you design the system accordingly so that you have those additional measures within the system and additional control structure. So that's in a nutshell, that's really the general concept of the modified stormwater design standards.
Mark, are you saying that the stormwater management system that would be in place would actually help the situation there?
It will eliminate, it will reduce the flows from the site itself. So it will reduce those peaks. So anything that could have been contributing before to the intersection, this will have a positive impact on that by reducing that contribution. But if there's another on-site source from another area, this won't address that.
Okay.
Which makes sense. Thank you for that clarifying question.
Yeah.
Does this?
So it will have an
it will
overall
reduce?
overarching positive impact, but it may not necessarily solve all of the prevailing
Of course,
problems.
yes, of course. Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just one last, the volume of runoff would go up, the rate of runoff from the site for example, the 2-year storm is half. The 10-year storm is 3/4, and then the 100-year storm, 80%. So the rate of runoff is definitely being reduced.
Good.
But I think overall it will help.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, so unless there are further questions on stormwater, turn to the landscape architecture report.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to just go through this and deal with them as conditions.
Thank you.
Item number 1, the condition is simply a note being added to the plan stating that there's no mature woodland canopy.
Further down, bottom of the page.
Bottom of the page, the condition is revising the calculations to the correct number of caliper inches that need to be replaced.
Top of the next page, page 2. The way I see it, I'd cross out the last sentence of your first bolded paragraph and make the rest a condition. Is that correct?
That's correct. This was the item that was discussed. The building is moved. We now have a required setback, but the plans have already been modified.
And the reason that I suggest crossing out the last sentence is because you say in red what?
The applicant has designated that the hedgerows are to be preserved, so it's already on the plan. It's not an alternative in the LOD. Item number 2. This is just a condition to modify the plans to show the actual locations of the tree protection fence as a straight line enclosing all the trees rather than simply circles. So that's
Correct.
just a modification, minor modification to the plan. Number,
Before you go to number 3, you're saying this has already been done?
well, it's the same comment, but
So that's also a condition.
that's also a condition. The LOD should be extended to minimum 15 feet. Again, you're
Yeah. That's understood.
straightening out the tree
Yeah, got
protection
it.
fence and the LOD is the condition. Thank you, John. Item number 2.
You have 5 sentences in red. Would Condition B, right, 5 sentences in red on page 3. I would take out the first, and the next 4 sentences would be the condition. Question?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Keep on going. Item 4.
Item 4, in red, the third item, it's a notation. We're asking for an increase in the species of evergreens on the plan. So it's a revision to the landscape.
Condition.
Okay. You're saying on page 4, there's a lot of things in red. What you're saying is anything in red should be a condition? Look at it before you say.
Yeah.
By the way, when you use the word should, I use the word shall. When you say it's desirable, I say they must. So look at them that way.
Yes, everything in red on page 4 and everything should be shall.
Right, okay.
Confirm you agree.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have of Mr. Stires unless there are site plan / professional engineering questions of this witness. Was saving that for our planner, but we'd be happy to answer them.
There was one comment, and I don't know who's going to answer this, but it's October 13th, yes. And it's in regards to the, page 3, item number 17, regarding the EV station that's proposed on site.
We will change that. I mean, that's kind of,
Explain.
I will. It's a detail we've had. What it does, it has a display on it. We are going to change that to just a plain old standard EV charging station. So
Okay, so the-
it will not have a display on it.
No advertisement.
If you're saying revised detail to eliminate signage?
Display.
The LED display. The LED display.
LED advertising display.
Revised detail to eliminate LED display.
Are there any more questions from board members to this witness? Any more questions from the professional staff? Is there anyone in the public that has a question for this witness? Not a comment, just a question.
And there are members of the public online.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that are online that have a question of this witness?
Are there?
No.
Mr. Stiles, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to just briefly call our architect, James Stankovich. And James, just confirm for the board, number one, you remain under oath, and number two, that your professional credentials after you were accepted at the last meeting all remain current and in good standing.
Yes, and yes.
Okay, so I'd request to proceed with Mr. Dankovich.
Good evening. I'm just here to testify on the update to the architectural drawings dated October 3rd, 2023. There are only changes in regard to the building's design related to footprint change made in order to increase the rear yard along the hedgerow. This caused the portion of the building along the hedgerow to become narrower and the other portion of the T of the building to become longer. This resulted in no changes to the architectural style or use of the building. Each sheet was updated to coordinate to those changes. We also made some updates on the elevations to coordinate some of the bollards and downspouts that were discussed in other comments.
So in other words, other than a shifting and slight reconfiguration of the building, all of your testimony from the last meeting as it pertains to the architectural style, the aesthetics of the building remain unchanged.
That's true. Also, the use and operation of the facility remains the same as well.
Great. That's all I have of Mr. Dankovich at this time.
Questions from the board members?
No,
Any
just-
questions?
Just a comment. I still love this design.
Thank
Did
you.
a great
Can't hear you.
Really like the design. They've done
Say
a
it
good
louder,
job.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from professionals of this witness? No. And from the public? And anyone that's on the internet?
Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call Gary Dean to present traffic testimony. Mr. Dean, you were already sworn. Can you just briefly provide your professional credentials for the board? I'm sure that you've been here before.
Certainly. I've been appearing in Raritan Township fairly regularly over the past 35 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer that specializes in the area of traffic engineering and municipal consulting for traffic-related matters. I am a licensed professional engineer, and that license is current and in good standing as well.
We'd offer Mr. Dean as an expert in traffic engineering.
We will accept him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dean, just briefly go over the traffic impacts of the facility once constructed.
Certainly. As indicated, the subject property lies in the B2 district in the municipality. That district or zone permits a variety of typical commercial uses, including retail uses, banks, hotels, commercial recreation similar to Health Quest, a veterinary office, child daycare centers, and as conditional uses, things such as shopping centers, gas stations, and automobile dealerships. The proposed mini warehouse or self-storage is also a permitted use in the zone, but as you're aware, we are seeking relief for a floor area ratio variance. I will say within that spectrum of permitted commercial uses, by far, a self-storage use generates the least amount of traffic I could conceive on this property. And the difference between what is permitted in terms of the allowable floor area ratio, that would yield a building of roughly 40,000 square feet. And this proposal is slightly more than double that. But in terms of traffic impact, even what we're proposing at its maximum, which would be a typical Saturday afternoon as perhaps residents or business users may avail themselves of the property, it would generate 10 customers. That's it. A gas station would probably be 8 times that amount. A shopping center literally would be hundreds more. And I spend most of my career talking about traffic impacts and looking at a lot of analysis. I think this represents a very unique opportunity for development in the community that has as close to zero a traffic impact as I can conceive, other than leaving it vacant. In terms of our access, we did spend a fair amount of time reviewing this with Hunterdon County prior to the development of this application and plans. We looked at things such as site distance and turning movements. And based on that county input, recognizing that Voorhees Corner Road is subject to county planning board jurisdiction, landed on the proposed access that is featured on the plans by Mr. Stiers. In terms of overall circulation, the use itself is generally passive. That's what self-storage is. I concur with the reduction to reduce the proposed amount of parking. 15 spaces is in line with what would typically be provided. Anywhere from 10 to 18 for this size facility is what is needed. And we've now settled at 15. So I think the site access is obviously safe and efficient, and there's suitable circulation and parking within the site interior for the use. Although tractor trailers do not typically frequent self-storage facilities, mostly because anyone who's moving out of a large single-family home that typically requires a truck of that size, that usually winds up, if it's needing storage, winds up at the moving company. The typical tenant spaces are 5 by 10, 10 by 10 units, for which a van, a minivan, or at most what is known as a box truck would typically be used, but tractor trailers are infrequently accessing these facilities. And
What happens if one shows up?
we have provided dimensions within the site to accommodate it. You'll see the site has, call it a roundabout, for lack of a better term, that promotes one-way counterclockwise traffic circulation. If we can get a fire truck in, which we would need to, we can accommodate a tractor trailer, but it's not the day-to-day type operation.
Yeah, the last hearing session
Yes, I
in
remember.
July, the applicant agreed to a limit on the size of the trucks, but they said they'll get back to us on the limit. The SU-30 design vehicle was used for the design of the site, they said. So what is an SU-30 and what is a tractor trailer?
Sure. SU-30 is a box truck. It stands for a single unit vehicle that is 30 feet long. The closest example I can give is the largest truck that U-Haul rents is 26 feet. So it's a slightly bigger box than that. Again,
Let's ask the applicant then.
and I'm sorry, Mr. Drill, the tractor trailer, by contrast, is typically considered a 50-foot or even larger wheelbase vehicle.
So if the applicant agreed last time, limit on the size of the truck to an SU-30, I'm going to suggest if the largest truck you can rent from like a U-Haul is 26 feet, then I'd ask the applicant, if the board's going to approve this, to agree to a limit on the size of the trucks allowed on the site to 26 feet long.
30. It's designed for the 30-foot truck. So again,
Right, I'm asking the applicant, not you, if the board's going to grant an approval, would they agree to a limit of 26 feet, since that's the maximum size truck, according to Mr. Dean's testimony, you could rent at a U-Haul?
Mr. Drill, if I could.
I'm not asking you, I'm asking the
I want
attorney.
to clarify for the record, a 30-foot box truck is typically what's used for commercial tenants. So if there's a tenant who's storing windows, they're a contractor, it's not inconceivable that that may require that size commercial truck. So the SU-30 would be the appropriate size.
So we did design for the SU-30. The applicant will stipulate to a condition that the largest size truck on site is 26 feet. And that includes the company vehicle that is potentially rented to tenants as part of the operation. Furthermore, we did add a sign and a note on the plans that tractor trailers are not permitted to access the site. But again, you just heard the testimony of Mr. Dean, that if some were to pull in for some reason, although they are not permitted, we have designed the site so that it can do a U-turn and exit the site safely. Does that
Thank you.
satisfy your?
That satisfies me. The board might very well say, put the limit at SU-30. I just wanted to find out if the applicant was willing to go to a 26. They are, that'll be up to the board.
Because if for commercial reason, I'm okay with 30. If there's a-
Okay,
We-
we're
we
fine
can't-
with 30 as
Rasul,
well.
we can't, Jackie can't hear you and we can't hear you when you talk.
Yeah, I just said, personally, I would be okay with 30. I don't know about my colleagues.
You might want to straw poll yourselves right now on that issue, assuming there's an approval. You haven't had the planning testimony.
Lindsay?
yet.
30 foot?
30?
See,
I think if the applicant is willing to go to 26, I'm good with 26. And if a 30, if it's made for 30, which I think is what, I thought the explanation was great. If a 30 happens, SU 30 happens to go in there, then it's going to be able to move out. So I would be good with the 26.
Randy, what'd you say?
So would I. I agree with 26.
26.
Okay, if a professional does rent a storage facility and does bring a 30, I think we're going to need to have approval for 30. So
I agree. I
I-
wouldn't want to limit a commercial renter
right.
that they couldn't use the facility when it is calculated or set up
Well,
for.
based on the straw poll, it's 4 in favor of 30, 2 in favor of 26. We'll see if, when we get to the end of the application, how important it is to the two.
Okay.
And we're willing to hear additional feedback on that issue at the end of our presentation if necessary, but obviously we're happy to do whatever the board wants. Again, we've designed it to accommodate the larger vehicle.
So thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Dean, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the board or anything you'd like to particularly address from Mr. Troutman's memorandum dated May 25th, 2023?
I don't believe so. Mr. Troutman has done a comprehensive and very fair evaluation, and I take no exception to any of his comments.
Okay, so let's just ask Mr. Troutman, is there anything that has to be made a condition from your report?
No, my report was addressed with the testimony at the last hearing and the written response that was submitted since then. I just have one question on the loading areas that I might have missed because I wasn't here.
First, check the date on the plans.
I know I have the October 3rd.
Yes, same with me.
Yeah.
We don't have, the board professionals, for whatever reason, it appears that you didn't submit enough of the November plans, so it never made it to the board professional. The board professionals had access via electronic, but not paper copies.
The question still holds. I see the November plan in front of me now. It's just on the, I guess the one loading space is at the very west end of the building where it says loading area towards Voorhees Corner Road. That's the one truck loading area that we're left with.
No, take a look at the November plan. They removed it. I think he testified.
still there.
No, it's still there?
They removed the 2 loading spaces and
Only left
provided
one.
1 space for their
For their van.
on-site.
Correct.
So where is that space?
That's it.
That
It
spot,
shouldn't say
okay.
loading space, it should say van parking space.
Okay, and then,
Correct?
And we will update the plan to reflect that if that's the preference of the board.
and then just one question I see over in kind of inside the building, there's a cross-hatched area and it says loading area next to that hatching. What's that area?
I may wish to defer that to our architect. I don't know. I'm pointing to the rendering by BWD Architects
Does that have
dated
an exhibit number on it?
dated 10/3/2023.
supplied.
I don't know that it's an exhibit because it's
Yeah, it
been
hasn't been
submitted.
yet. We're up to exhibit A3. It looks like those two are going to be exhibit A4 and A5.
If you'd like, I mean, I know specifically that rendering was submitted to the board 10 days in advance. But if you'd like to mark it, we can.
It's not a new exhibit.
I would need him to check the exhibit folder.
If you don't want to get hung up on it, we're happy to mark it.
Let's mark that as exhibit A4, just identify it.
Gary, can you identify
Well,
that?
actually, who prepared that?
That's our architect.
So let's just get him, the architect. Identify exhibit A4. It's a color rendered what?
This is the project overview. P500 was submitted on October 3rd with the rest of our resubmission. And that striping area is used for people to maneuver in and out of the doors here. There's one of the main elevators is back here, so it allows people to come through.
Okay, just so you know, you said you submitted it. We don't have it. None of the board professionals have it. Do you guys have this in your package? Just identify it for the record. It is a color rendered what?
It is a color rendering axonometric of the building from overhead.
Okay, a color rendered isometric of the building.
And it's labeled P500 sheet 5 of 9, 10/3/2020.
All right. It doesn't matter, we don't have it. They're not seeking approval of it. It's an exhibit. So it's covered. It's exhibit A4. So now have Mr. Dean do whatever he was gonna say, whatever he was gonna say about it.
Well,
Sure, just this striping here is just to allow for people to bring carts in and out of these doors that access the elevator lobby. And it just gives them room to get around to their cars without going through the travel vehicle.
Passenger loading, right?
Well, it's,
Passenger loading or
Well,
pedestrian
it's
loading?
for people's goods that they're storing in the building.
so,
they
so
can-
it's kept clear. So
Yeah.
people can walk through there.
Yes.
Vehicles don't sit in there.
That's not the intention.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. One more question.
Did you use exhibit A5 as part of your presentation or not? Why don't you just have the architect, let's just get that marked as an exhibit.
That's prepared by Mr. Steyer's office.
Okay, so
Can
have
you
Mr. Steyers.
describe the,
When we marked, did someone physically mark that exhibit? Right-hand corner A4 with today's date, please.
so we have A4 marked, again, that's sheet 5 of 9 from the architectural plan set as described. Mr. Steyers, can you describe what you've just marked as A5 for the record?
Color rendered what?
A5 is dated, today's date is the color rendering of the landscape plan, also called rendering dated 12/21/23. I'm not, as far as the submitted plans, we submitted 18 sets of both the architecturals and the site plan. So
What happened?
Russell
I
has
would-
it.
I just
Russell
have a-
has it. I don't know why.
You have in color?
Yeah.
The whole plan is 317. 3/17/2023.
That was already submitted.
I know,
This one did not have to be marked. This one was already, it should have been part of it already.
No, I'm talking about that one. P500.
All right, listen, it doesn't matter. It's A4 for our purposes.
Yeah, we're happy to mark it
Yeah.
for the record and
Mark
clear it up. I mean,
So A5, again, I'm sorry, is color rendered what? Landscape plan dated 12/21/23.
Yeah.
Okay. Ah, okay.
okay. Do you have anything else?
I do not know.
So I guess we'd ask any additional questions of Mr. Dean at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I have questions absolutely on the traffic. Was there any testing done with respect to the traffic patterns with respect to this area? Or was it just that, this is a storage facility and there's not going to be a lot of traffic? That's one of the things I have a concern about.
Sure. We submitted, it was an internal memorandum, but it wound up getting submitted to the board. Mr. Troutman makes reference to
It's
it. It
dated
was
July 29, 2022, correct?
Correct.
a site access evaluation prepared by me dated July 29th, 2022. That analysis included traffic count data along Voorhees Corner Road. It looked at travel in both directions. It looked at the projection of site-generated traffic and the relative ease in turning left or right from the site driveway, as well as for ingress movements. That is featured on Figure 2, which depicts each of the projected levels of service, which is a grade that traffic engineers use to assess operations, with a projection of level of service C during each peak hour exiting the site and a level of service B entering. So generally very favorable.
Yeah, it's right here. I
Thank
did
you.
go through.
Did anyone go out to the site and actually see the traffic patterns?
I've been out there, yes, as part of this, as well as other projects with which we're involved.
I'm worried about this project because I'm going to tell you that road, I don't know, I drive it multiple times a day. And because I go to the veterinarian over there and I can tell you, and I go to the strip mall over there, that traffic already is horrific. Going in and out, there's almost accidents every time. So My concern is how is this going to affect whether you have a ton of people going into the storage place, which by the way, what would be is there an analysis as to what day or what time of day would be I didn't see this. I saw Mr. Troutman's response, but I didn't see this document.
Put
So
it this way,
that's why I'm asking.
the way I would analyze this from your question is if they did not need an FAR variance,
Correct,
okay?
Yep.
So if their FAR was 25%, they would not be here.
correct.
They'd be at the planning. Board. If they were at the planning board, planning board's not allowed to ask about any off-traffic conditions, because presumably if you meet the ordinance, permitted use, presumably the cases say the governing body has taken that into account. Now, they still have to prove safe ingress and egress. So my question is, what would your expected traffic generation be at peak hours at your proposed facility, which is at almost 60% FAR? And then what would the projected traffic generation be at 25% FAR? And give him the two numbers, and that will answer his question about how much more traffic would be generated.
Sure, I'll do my best. If one were to develop a 40,000 square foot self-storage facility, and I'll go right to the Saturday peak hour, which is the highest, we would generate about 4 customers an hour. Under this
Four
proposed.
customers is 4 in, 4 out, 8 trips.
Correct. By contrast, we're expecting that to be at about 10.
In contrast, your square footage at 59.47% is what?
Roughly 90,000 square feet.
Okay, and at 90,000 square feet, what would the Saturday peak, how many customers and how many trips?
10 customers comprised of 10 entering and 7 leaving. The assumption being some people just remain on site a little longer.
So 10 customers, 17 trips?
Correct.
And what is the peak hour on Saturday?
Middle of the afternoon. There is no, we have not specified that, Mr. Drill. It is in the range somewhere falling between, and I'm looking at the data that was compiled.
I mean, have you guys been on that road on a Saturday afternoon? It's horrific.
Understand, anything that gets built on this site is going to have a far worse traffic impact than what we're proposing. This is as close to an undeveloped site as I can conceive.
Right, but he's asking you, what he's saying is, he understands that. It would be less traffic generated if you were at 25% than 59.47. He's asking you to, quantify that. That's where he's coming from.
I mean, here's my point. My point is that road, even during the day, forget about Saturday, the biggest times of mornings, middle afternoon, rush hour, the weekends in Flemington have become a disaster. Okay. So what I want to, and I watch people sit at that veterinarians, and I've done it, where you need to go left and you literally have to wait and wait and wait and wait. And sometimes you give up and you have to go right and have a whole new route. I don't see how this is going to help that pattern of practice or this traffic practice or pattern of traffic. And I have a real concern with how that is going to impact that area of the road, by the way, which is not far from the traffic light in 202, which is going to make it back up even further. In the mornings and even in the afternoons, it backs up almost all the way past the entrance for the veterinarian. So I'm actually shocked that the veterinarian office isn't here. This is my biggest concern right now is the traffic with respect to this site.
Can we find out when's the busiest days for a self-storage? I assume it's the weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
That is correct.
And so would the testimony about the peak at peak hour with customers and trips, would they be relatively same for Saturday and Sunday?
I'm not sure the facility is open on Sunday. Each operator is a little different.
Let's ask, what is this facility proposed to be open on Saturday and Sundays or just Saturdays? Just to tell your attorney, because unless you want to come on back up, you're Arthur Corsini, right? Yeah,
There's every day.
7 days a week, you said. So
7 days a week from 6 to 10.
6 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week, which would include Saturdays and Sundays.
And am I correct that this entrance is going to be directly across the way, right, from the veterinary?
No,
No?
I think,
It-
you know
it
how
is
the vet
not.
has that, the veterinarian has that side road where they had to build? So the veterinarian couldn't build where he wanted to because he has to have an easement for a road
Yeah.
on the far side of his building. That's where I think it's lining up with.
Between Ridge Road and the veterinarian, Steve.
Yeah, why don't you use one of those exhibits and you can answer his questions?
From,
Let them use.
I don't think the
exhibit.
driveway is.
no, it's between the veterinarian's driveway and Ridge Road. Halfway through.
Yeah.
Mr. Stiers has just marked an aerial exhibit that shows Route 202 running
Is
on,
that a
and it's
new
marked,
exhibit or is that, so
It's
that's going to be
marked-
exhibit A6.
it's marked A6
I know,
with
let
today's
him
date.
introduce it since it's his exhibit, then you can testify about it. I'm an I-dotter and a T-crosser, you know that. Don't get frustrated with me. You should know about this before you come here.
The exhibit is A6 dated today's date. It's an aerial view of the facility with the facility directly in the middle of it. Route 202 is along the left-hand side. Voorhees Corner is going left to right on the plan.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Dean, you're set to go.
With north being generally to the top of the page, and again, 202 running on the diagonal, Voorhees Corner Road is running horizontal on the exhibit. You will see in a brown tone the proposed self-storage facility. The veterinary office is located much further to the west than the proposed site driveway. And in fact, the commercial buildings that are accessed via Reading Road are directly opposite the proposed driveway. So to your concern, our driveway is about twice as far from Route 202 as the vet's driveway.
Okay, but, oh, geez. All right, but you just made a good point. So you would have the veterinarians their driveway would be first if you were coming from 202 would be on the right.
Correct.
You'd go up and you'd have the proposal driveway on your left, right?
Correct.
And then you go up a little further and you'd have the Reading Ridge Road on your right.
That is correct.
Okay, so you're going to have 3 different levels of entrance and exit from that road.
Correct. Within a distance of 700 feet. 3 driveways in 700 feet.
Okay. And you know, again,
Hey, Steve,
yeah,
not okay. What do you think? Because it's a good point about the traffic, especially on Saturday. The weekend is where we're concerned.
Yes, I looked at all the calculations and it really falls on the extremely low traffic generation of the use. That's really where everything falls.
He knows that. What he wants, what he is concerned with, he understands this is the lowest traffic generator of all the permitted uses. He gets that. What his question is, okay, that's great, and it would have been wonderful if they left it at 20 or 25% and went to the planning board. Why do they even have to get the additional trips? That's what he's.
Jay, let me ask you a question, because this is something that comes up, and sometimes we have these sites that they look great, and there may be some questions. Let me ask you a question. Would you agree with me that the traffic in Flemington has increased in the last 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, it's not what it was 10 years ago, was it? You'd agree with me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Dean, I asked you this in a prior application. I asked you, is Flemington have increased traffic than it did 10 years ago? Your answer was no. So I'm going to ask you again. Is the traffic in Flemington increased in the last 10 years?
And I'm not trying to parse, it has in the region, if we're looking at just Flemington Borough, that itself, if we isolate the little hole in the donut, has been fairly static. However, we know that Liberty Village is to be redeveloped. We know that the Union Hotel has been redeveloped. We know that Raritan Town Square, there are new apartments. There are new apartments approved next to Costco. Unquestionably, traffic has increased, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. My concern is this area of road, which I drive all the time, it's already bad. And I get it. This is, listen, you're right. There's no doubt that this is probably the only, I think, permitted use that would actually fit. My concern is still the traffic. I'm concerned that, I mean, if you guys haven't ever been a part of this or witnessed it or experienced it, it's frustrating as hell when you're sitting at a driveway to make a left. You can't, at times, you just can't make the left. It just doesn't happen. So now you're going to add another driveway in another business, and there's no, whether it's low or no traffic, I mean, you're going to have some type of traffic, obviously. My concern is that it's certainly going to have a negative impact on that area of, and by the way, there's accidents there all the time. And now we're going to put another, we're going to have, this is a concern for
But you
me.
have to put it in terms of the FAR variance. There's
Well,
nothing you could,
I agree.
If it was 25%, there's nothing anyone could say about it. As long as
Agreed.
they have safe ingress and exit.
Agreed, but they're before us, and this is what they want. So if you're gonna, for us, I have to look at the negative impact, and to me, this is the biggest negative impact in this application is the traffic. I'm concerned that there hasn't been a detailed study on this.
John, we're going to have
just-
to leave it here. We've already gone almost 10 minutes over.
Okay.
So
Could I briefly respond to the board member before we break? Because he's clearly expressed a concern and I'd like to respond. Look, I mean, what we're here for specifically is this site's going to be eventually developed by somebody. And what we're hoping for is to take a use that's permitted in the zone, understand the economic realities of the amount of units that make a facility like this work, which is why the building is slightly larger.
Yeah, listen, you need someone, you can't testify.
I'm not
You're the
testifying,
attorney.
I'm
You need
providing
some- You need
arguments.
someone to say that. You need your rep or something to say that the argument that you're going to make sure it's based on something you have in the record next time, you're going to make that argument, and you're going to make a further argument with your planner, I assume, that if you find some totally conforming other use that doesn't need any variances, and you're going to take a look at traffic generation, but don't argue it now because you're just making an argument. Have them put facts in and then make the argument.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Drill, and we will do that. I just wanted to say my intent from responding to the board member was to attempt to assuage his concerns. Now, if you'd like additional traffic testimony when we recall our application, we will certainly do so. And with that, we thank the board for your consideration.
Okay, so you want to get this thing continued to a date certain so you don't have to renotice, correct?
well, there's a possibility that we may have additional time
That's
left
true.
over.
Stick
So,
around.
Yeah, we were going to
Very
stick
welcome
around.
to
for
Stick
that.
around. You're right.
I think our transcriptionist would like a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 8:20. Getting back into order. I'm going to call our third case for the evening, which is BOA case number 18-2023. The application is Carlo Vitale, the location block 40.04, lot 15. And the address is 15 Buchanan Way. The application is for C variance or exceeding maximum hard surface coverage of 20%. Mr. Cirillo, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. So that is exactly correct. This is, we have one
Enter your
variance tonight.
appearance. I know we all know you, but enter your appearance so it's.
Patrick J. Cirillo, Flemington, New Jersey, on behalf of the applicant Carlo Vitale. I do have Mr. Vitale here behind me. I don't think I need his testimony unless there's a specific question. Also, the buyers of his house are here but they're not here to testify. I just have one witness, Christopher Nusser, and I'd like to have him sworn in now and we'll get him going.
Okay, we're gonna get which of the board experts are participating in this application? Everyone at this table? No, just you two. Okay, so three witnesses, stand up, raise your right hand. All three of you swear or affirm the testimony you're gonna give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can you state your name for the record and your relationship to the applicant or the board as the case may be?
Nice and loud, nice and slow.
Right.
It's Christopher Nusser, Nusser.
Can someone close that door because we are hearing a lot of noise? Thank you.
The applicant's engineer and planner.
If, for the board, I think Mr. Nusser's been here before.
Mark Katriniak, board engineer.
Jeff Becker, Township Planner.
Mr. Nusser has been here before, sworn in as a professional planner, but if you wanted to go through his credentials real quick.
Put it this way, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If someone is out in the wings, right, doesn't tell you and they file a prerogative writ and they say that the board didn't qualify him, it's gonna be your risk. You do what you think.
So
you should do.
go through your licenses, please, and educational background quickly.
Certainly. I graduated from Rutgers University in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. I have been practicing land development engineering since graduating. I have appeared before over 70 boards in the state of New Jersey and been accepted as an expert witness as a professional planner and engineer. Both of those licenses are in good standing.
Okay,
Mr.
and
Nusser, have you
what do you want to
before this?
qualify him as tonight for? An engineering expert and a planning expert? Or-
Yeah,
That's correct.
Have you appeared before this board before?
certainly have.
I thought so. Okay, thank you.
Time or two.
We will accept this gentleman as an expert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Nusser, if you would, please go through the plan, the variance plan that's before the board tonight, and then we'll have you also go through the professionals from the board and go through their comments and letters as well.
This is the most recent.
If you want, if you get up at all, you can take that mic and walk with
Okay.
it. Okay.
And this December 6, 2023 plan is in the board file and all board members have it. Doesn't have to be marked. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So the property, again, is 15 Buchanan Way. It is block 40.04, lot 15. This is a 27,938 square foot lot in the R3 zone. This is part of a subdivision that was a cluster subdivision. So where the R3 zone requires 50,000 square feet lot size, this lot is, or would reasonably be considered deficient, other than it was created as part of the cluster. The plan that is on the board here, Buchanan Way, is on the right side of the property. The house is located in front of the property, driveway along the left side of the house with a, it's a garage, I guess you call it garage under behind. So it's not a side entry garage, it's a rear entry garage. So the house requires a little bit more driveway to accommodate the fact that you have to kind of come all the way around the house to get in there. There is open space to the rear of the lot. So going beyond, as part of the cluster subdivision, that area was dedicated as open space. There are some fields off of Case Boulevard that are on there. Soccer field and is this baseball field on there? If I remember correctly, is that baseball? We'll
Not-
pass it all the time, and I just,
You're talking about the soccer field over by Clover Glen or?
no, it's across from the middle school. So the open space,
Oh,
you're coming
yes.
off of 202 and you're coming down Case, the school's on your right.
Yes, there is.
On your left, there's some fields there, and they're part of the open space that was a result of this development. In between that, within the open space as well, there's a stream and there's some wetlands that are associated with it. You can see on the corner of the plan here, there's a dashed line and that is the municipal stream corridor line for the stream that exists in the rear. There is also a drainage easement along the right side of the property coming from Buchanan Way, going to the rear of the property. It takes the road drainage about halfway down to a head wall, and 3/4 of the way down to a head wall, where it discharges into a stone lined ditch, and then carries that water into the stream in the rear, which eventually makes its way over to the South Branch. So we are here tonight asking for forgiveness, in effect. We are not proposing any new improvements on this property. There are a number of existing improvements. Some of those have zoning permits, some of those do not, which are outlined in Mr. Vaccarella's letter. That includes the pool, which did have a permit, the pool and spa. And I apologize if I'm going a little fast. Jackie, if you want to slow me down, slow me down. I understand it's a very full agenda tonight, so I'm just trying to keep myself moving along. There is a deck to the rear of the house that is elevated with some walkways connecting those spaces. There was a expanded patio around the pool that was constructed that has an outdoor kitchen on it. There are a couple canopies that were built on top of the paver patios. As was requested in Mr. Vaccarella's letter, we outlined what the approved impervious coverage is for this property with all the zoning permits that were issued, which we outlined on these plans, and it's at 23.91%. So it was already over the 20% allowed in the zone as it was approved. With these additional improvements, we are at 39.61%, where again, 20% is permitted in the zone. I will note, in maybe not in defense, but as we get into it and we discuss the planning aspects of this application, that this used to have a higher impervious coverage allowed, as I understand it. That was 40%. That was changed over time and now is down to 20%. And then obviously with the recent amendments, 27% with stormwater. Seeing as how we're still above the 27%, obviously why we're here, but we are still providing stormwater management. We went out to the site and performed test pit on the site in what was not a surprise to me for all the testing that I've done and witnessed over the years in this part of town. We did a basin flood test and it failed. Maybe half of it drained. So we don't have the ability.
Hold up one second. When you close the door, tell them if they're going to keep on talking like that, they got to keep the door shut.
Can't they use the conference room over there? There's the conference room. Use the lobby.
Thank you.
No, the other lobby, the main lobby. Sorry. There's no. So we don't have permeability on here. So similar to the application that my colleague presented before you, Mr. Creeder's application, where testing was done and we had no permeability on the site. We have the same issue here. It's just the nature of the geology in the area. So what we've proposed instead of a system that infiltrates because the ordinance looks for us to infiltrate an amount of water for that increase in impervious, which we cannot do. So we're putting in a detention system. We are taking the area of the roof of the house and putting it into two 30-foot long, 24-inch diameter pipes that would be under the grass area in the backyard. That will have a 3-inch outlet pipe. So the water from the roof will come into there, into that basin, and it will be contained to slow it down. The report that we prepared and provided shows that take a quick step back. When we modeled it, we modeled the site as if there was 20% coverage on this property. So we said we have a 27,938 square foot lot. 20% of that is impervious, 80% of it is lawn area. We have a rate that the runoff came off the site. And we did the 100-year storm, biggest storm in this case. And then we looked at this site as it's built with the 39.61%, and we routed the house through the proposed basin. And the result of it, as we documented in the report, is that the rate of runoff isn't necessarily the volume of runoff, because again, we can't put it back into the ground. The rate of runoff is lower in our proposed condition than it would be as if it was a conforming 20% lot. So our opinion is we are mitigating the impacts from the stormwater in that storm event from the increase in impervious from this site. That system discharges into that riprap line swale along the property line, and then continues on its way. But again, the net result here is that we have, we're managing our stormwater on site down to the rate of runoff that would be in a conforming property. So I just want to ask if there's any questions from the board on that in particular. I just want to make sure that I was clear on my.
Well, I'm lost completely, so
Okay.
I'll wait and.
Yeah, same with me. I went up to, I asked Mark if he could take a stab at explaining it, but before he does that, just a quickie. In the beginning, you correctly noted that the R3 zone has a minimum lot size of 50,000 feet. You then said, because this is a cluster, it's allowed to be 25,000 feet, 25,000 square feet. But that's because of, on Schedule 2, if it's a cluster with municipal water and municipal sewer, which is, right? And this is on municipal water and sewer, correct?
That's correct.
So that's why the minimum lot area is 25,000 square feet, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. Just wanted to, otherwise it'd be 35.
Right. Right, Mark, can you?
Okay, I'll try and explain it. And I think what the applicant's engineer has done is tried to provide a comparison of what this drainage from the site would look like if the site were compliant with the lot coverage requirements compared to what is being proposed with the mitigation. I understand that. I think there's a couple of key differences that the board needs to understand. The subject lot, if it were of conforming lot coverage, the analysis had been done as if all of the runoff discharged to a single point. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so it really doesn't do that. It kind of sheet flows off the back and sides of the property. So it doesn't, the drainage as it presents on the specific property, kind of sheet flows off in a couple directions along the property. But it was analyzed as if it all discharged to a single point. The applicant then created a detention system that's comprised of, and I'm referring to the latest plan dated December 3rd? 6th, December 6th. So the applicants proposed a revised drainage retention system that consists of two 30-foot long, 24-inch diameter pipes with an orifice, correct?
It's just controlled by the size of the outlet pipe.
Right.
So it doesn't have an actual like orifice plate on it. It's just a 3-inch pipe lead.
With a 3-inch discharge, right? But it's two 30-foot long, 24-inch pipes.
Correct.
Right. Okay. In a stone trench. And that system was directly piped to the downspouts for the roof of the house. So if you were to look at, my initial analysis was, let's drain the overage on the lot coverage. Is the equivalent square footage of what they're over on lot coverage. The roof does not equate to that. The roof is about half of what you're over.
Yes.
About half of what you're overage on the lot coverage. So about half of the volume that the property exceeds the lot coverage on is directly piped into this detention system.
Could they pick up the other half somewhere else?
And that was my question, and I think the way the site is configured, can you,
Well, again, I think we could probably go through some gymnastics to acquire, to collect some more water. I think the point of what we're doing in the system is to mitigate that rate of runoff, and understanding that, yes, it doesn't all go to one point. It all does run to the rear of the property, which is then into the open space.
right, but I just wanted to make a point, because
Yeah.
we're talking about a lot coverage variance, and now we're trying to talk about drainage flow. So I just
Right,
want
so
to,
just so you understand,
I want to connect that.
before the Creeder application,
Mhm.
all the other applications, now, true, they could infiltrate. Okay, so Creeder was an exception based on the hardship variances and other things you can, it's in the resolution. But the initial concept that the board came up with was stormwater mitigation to bring the site down to act as if it was less than the 20%.
Which is
Correct.
what we believe we've accomplished with this system.
Yeah.
But if you only did half and not the other half, how?
Well, I think that to some extent because what the applicant has done is the detention base, they basically put a small enough discharge pipe on the detention system. By only putting a 3-inch pipe at the end, they backed up a lot of that water so that the peak runoff, so he's just looking at a peak runoff, not recharge. That peak runoff discharge, the peak runoff is lower than what a conforming site would be if you're comparing peak runoff to peak runoff. So in one aspect, the applicant has reduced the peak runoff rates to below what a lot coverage conforming site would be. The difference is the applicant has concentrated that into a point discharge as opposed to sheet flow off the property. So I think the one thing I think the applicant needs to provide a little testimony on is we sort of have this hydraulic analysis as a comparison, and it really only addresses, the peak flow. It is lower than what it would be if there were a point discharge for a conforming lot. But we're going from a sheet flow to a point discharge. I think the applicant has to demonstrate that that concentration of flow doesn't create an impact on a neighbor's property.
Sure. And more than happy to do that. Right now, the roof leaders themselves are piped. They're all piped together, which is why on the plan here, the pipe comes back and just kind of ends at a point. We don't know where those roof leaders are. Contractor's gonna have to find it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. That's why.
Yeah,
I understand now.
So
Okay.
right now, the roof leaders discharge into the swale. So about 10 feet to the street side is about where that roof leader pipe comes in. So the roof leaders are already point discharging to that point, which again is going into the riprap line swale that's part of the stormwater system for the development, right? It's in an easement to the municipality between the pipe, the swale, and then it goes to the rear into, it goes into the stream, and then ultimately goes into the stream, follows its way down, goes under the highway. It's that little stream that goes along River Road, cuts behind Northlands and goes into the river. So while there is a point discharge for what we're proposing, there currently is one right now. The roof leaders are going 10 feet upstream, basically from where we're discharging now. The difference is we're sending the water detained. So it's going to be coming into the swale at a lower rate than it currently does. So the sheet flow portion of it pretty much maintains, and it's that point discharge that would go in there, and to the point of, would it have an impact on the neighboring property? My testimony on that is it absolutely would not. We're discharging into a stabilized swale, again, big rocks in it, and it's conveying all the neighborhood's water.
My preference would be that the applicant contain a larger drainage area into the containment system. And that was what I had initially asked with the question is if, since the drainage area that you're directly tying to this retention system is only about half of what you're over on your lot coverage, is there a way to increase that contributing drainage area? Because while this system will take the runoff from the roof and reduce the peaks as compared to an overall 20% or conforming lot coverage property, you still have lot coverage on the site that's sheet flowing off the site that's not detained or restricted in any way. So while you're comparing 2 point discharges, the existing property has some sheet flow. So I think one sort of two-part question would be, number one, is there any opportunity to reduce some of the lot coverage on the site by removing some of the existing improvements? Or number two, part and parcel of that, is there a way to tie a slightly larger drainage area into the system?
And before you answer that, so I'm looking at your plan. Last revised December 6, 2023, and you have 2 charts on the lower right-hand side. You have impervious coverage calculations chart, and you have approved impervious coverage calculations.
Yes.
So if you compare, for example, the pavers, and I'm not saying this is this particular applicant's fault or he's responsible, but someone had approval for 359 square feet of pavers, and what was installed? Almost 3,000 square feet of pavers. You look at the pavement, they had approval with a permit for 2,395 square feet of pavement. Someone installed 2,779 square feet of pavement. So if you took a look at those 2 were the biggest items, can some of that be removed? Because that would also cut down not only the impervious coverage, but that's the place, that's how the board has viewed these applications. That's the place where you need the variance, because you were approved at 23.91%. So even though the max is 20%, no one can take that 23.9% away from you if you had valid permits. But your impervious coverage is not at 23.91%. It's at 39.61%, meaning there were a lot of unauthorized impervious coverage put down on the site. So what parts of that unauthorized impervious coverage could you remove to lower your impervious coverage? And if you need time to talk to the applicant and or the applicant's buyers, why don't you take a short recess? Because it would make the application go faster, and it might even make it able to conclude tonight rather than having to come back. You want to ask the chair for a 5-minute recess?
No, we actually discussed this beforehand. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we talked about there's 2 areas that we could, and I'm going to mark this down.
The lower right-hand corner, A1 with the date. And A1, I assume, is going to be the variance plan last revised December 6, 2023, and you're going to have some markings on it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there are some opportunities up here to reduce coverage on it. One is the table walk. That's located pool patio. To the side of the shed, the access to the gardens over there. That's
a work session.
Additionally, we could remove paper walk from the pool, downstairs, place that way. That makes the path. I think, if we get
Excuse me, do you have a total square footage of what you're proposing to remove?
And before you do that, can you just confirm how you got the numbers of the group?
Well, Taylor was kind enough to send me the permits for both of those. And so looking at the improvements that were permitted by those permits, looking at aerial photographs, of when it was constructed. And that's, doing assessment of what was there at the time when it was approved. So like the driveway, the reason that number is larger is because the driveway was extended rearward to assist with backing out of the garage.
I can ask,
Yeah.
based on all whatever you're saying, what would be the net improvement? From 39, what would you bring it down?
He's gonna have to do a calculation. We have another applicant. My suggestion is that don't cut this, let this next applicant go and then continue them, have him do the calculations, come up, submit a plan, show exactly what they're, willing to do and how low they can go. Otherwise, this is like, you're gonna do a work session.
Yeah. It's really going again.
Mark, but I have a question for Mark. So Mark, back to your question where you wanted a larger retention. And looking at the drawings, I'm asking, in my mind, that doesn't make sense. And this is why I'm asking. Past the pool, the property where there is grass, all that sheet water would run off anyway that way, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't understand what you're asking because where would they get the water to flow into that? Are you saying somehow the water that's going to flow onto the pavement, around the pool and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another
Okay.
portion of the roof, a portion of the patio, pipe, another section of the hard
Yeah, you
surface
put
to
in
the
French
detention
drains,
system.
French
Okay.
drains on the
Yeah.
downhill side of
Yeah.
various
So
impervious.
to use round numbers, if you're comparing it to lot coverage, right? Let's just use round numbers for argument's sake. If you're allowed 20% coverage
Mhm.
and you have 40% coverage, you want to take that 20% overage and pipe that to a retention system. So you can say, okay, the unchecked or uncontrolled hard surface that's sheet flowing off the property is conforming to the ordinance for lot coverage. And it's the portion that's over is being treated for reductions in flow.
Okay.
That would be the
Right.
one-for-one comparison.
Right, and another way of looking at it is, since they're entitled, based on permits for 23 point whatever percent, and let's just, I'm saying hypothetically,
right.
because I'm looking at how the calculation was done, the calculation was estimated. They may have been actually approved just for 20%, but let's assume for argument's sake, they were approved at 23 point whatever percent. If they could bring that down to 20%,
Yeah,
and then do this with the rest, that's another way of doing it. But I think that rather than do a work session, they should have an offline, they should have a meeting with Mark and with Jeff in the office, go about it, how much impervious can you remove and how much impervious generated flow could you pick up?
yeah,
And see what they
Okay.
can come up with. And these guys will give them what the board makes their own decisions, they don't do. If the professional says, my opinion is this, I'd say 75% of the time they follow it, but 25% of the time they don't. So, but if you do satisfy these two guys, that increases your likelihood that you're gonna get a positive vote. So, let's continue this to a date certain. So what kind of date certain do you have? And how much, first of all, Chris Nusser, how much time do you need, knowing that Christmas is coming up and the board has a meeting on January 4th,
And
which is the
18th.
reorg. Do you have anything on that agenda?
Yes,
How many applications?
one,
Oh.
honestly.
If
Is
you-
it?
Well, look, do you think that's enough time to get on for January?
Two, I'm sorry, two.
Okay. Well, still, do you think you have enough time? Because if you work the thing out with them, they made a recommendation, again, no guarantee, but the hearing time would not be that long, I assume. So do you have enough time between now?
I'm gonna, let's put it this way, I will find enough time, because just knowing what the board's agenda looks like for the 18th of January, that you have target and
Yes.
you may carry something else out to it. I think with one thing on the agenda, we will make.
Okay,
sure we're ready.
so the hearing, first of all, is there anyone here, should have asked, on the Vitale application? No. So let's make an announcement that the hearing on the Vitale application is going to be carried to January 4, 7 PM, this room, no need for further notice. And in the interim, your engineer is going to work offline with the board engineer and the board planner on various proposals to see if you could get both of them in a position where they would be willing to make recommendations to the board. Understood? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, he's got to do the plan. These guys just have to review it.
Yeah, we'll be presenting it as obviously an exhibit.
An exhibit.
on the night of the hearing.
That's right, because it would become a condition of approval if there was an approval. It would be a condition of approval is to revise the plans consistent with Exhibit A1. Hopefully you get to that point. Or they might say, give them two options, give them an A1 and give them an A2.
Thank you.
John, I can keep this from the other application?
That was mine.
Yeah, take it back. I'll get it. I looked at your house.
Always.
I can always see my mark.
No? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Merry Christmas to you.
Our board member's gonna freeze. It's an emergency. No, he says he can open that door.
As long as it doesn't.
And it's cardboard. Drink after this one. Yeah.
Jackie, do you need any additional time? Okay. Randy?
Guys, are you guys all set to go? Give your thumbs up.
All set?
Oh,
Hang on for Taylor.
are you all set or not? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like to call our third application, which is BOA case number 3-2023. And the applicant is Luis A. Pastrana Hernandez and Margarita Pastrana. The location is block 71, lot 10. Then the address is 9 Cool Road. The application is a request for a bifurcated D variance for a second principal use on a property. Counselor, I've been through this application and
Let him make his appearance on the record.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, may it please you and members of this board, my name is John Lanzett. It's my privilege to represent the Pastranas in this application so this evening, and I understand that the chair has a question. I understand the chair has a question. or a comment.
I do. Do you want to swear in everybody?
Yeah. Let's, who are your experts gonna, or who are your witnesses?
Mr. Clerico, Bob Clerico is the engineer. We have Mark Resnick as the planner. And we have Mr. and Mrs. Pastrana
Answer any questions? All right, so everyone he just mentioned, stand up. Let's, the board experts participating are just the planner and the engineer. So everyone raise the right hand. And does everyone swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes.
Okay. And could everyone identify themselves for the record, spell your last name, and give your relationship to the applicant or the board as the case may be?
Just use that microphone that's up there. One at a time, you guys can go up.
Mr. Clerico can use the microphone right in front of his seat.
Robert Clerico, Van Cleef Engineering Associates.
And you are the applicant's engineering expert, correct?
Margarita Pastrana.
You're the applicant.
I'm the applicant.
Louis Pastrana, the applicant. Yeah, hold
Okay,
on. She needs to get that.
Jackie didn't get that. You got to go nice and loud and slow.
Louis Pastrana. And also the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Mark Remsa. I'm the professional planner.
Spell last name?
My last name is spelled R-E-M-S-A.
Okay.
Mark Katriniak, board engineer.
Jeff Beccarella, township planner.
We're ready to proceed with our first witness.
Okay.
As I said, I've been through the entire application very carefully, and I guess my concern is the D variance, I think we can hear without issue. My concern, however, is with some of the C variances. Although we don't need final plans, we don't see much for the addition on the house. And my concern is moving forward without, and with the bifurcation, even though we can't really see any kind of general plans to get a really good idea of what is being done with the house. The
You're talking about
garage we
the
can see, but-
aesthetics of the addition to the house?
Yeah.
You want to just go with the bifurcated D variance and then worry about the Cs later? Or if you, I would think you'd want to do them all together, but can you respond to?
Yeah, my response would be that it would be up to your, your pleasure certainly, but we can go into some of the dimensions, but as far as.
No, they know the dimensions. It's shown on the,
Yeah, it's shown
on the
on the
conceptual
plan.
site plan. What he's saying is there's no elevation showing what the house is going to look like. So how are they going to judge whether or not they should grant these setback variances if they don't know, the aesthetics of what they'd be approving closer than the ordinance allows? That's what he's asking. And he's asking, what would you like to do about it? Would you like to just go with the bifurcated D? And I believe there's two bifurcated Ds. I know the agenda said one, but there's two of them.
There's two.
Right. Or do you want to, and forget about the Cs for now, and then come back with elevations with the Cs, or do you want to just come back with both and do it all at the same time? That's what he's asking.
Well, we're here this evening. We might as well proceed with D variances.
Okay.
I think that would be the best way to, and the most efficient way to
Yeah,
proceed.
they could use their time, focus on the D, on the two Ds, and then you could ask for it to be continued to hit the Cs, or if you want to get a vote on it, then you're gonna do another application for C. You can decide what to do at the end.
Yes, the two, we are proceeding on a bifurcated basis for two variances. One is for commercial use on the property, and the other is for more than one principal use on the property, because there's a residence there. I will present to this board an old certificate that we received when Randy Grant was occupying the premises. That generally describes the premises and what was approved previously as far as the two uses on the property. But he had a surveyor, engineering type business there. This business is a pool liner business where the Pastranas go and they do renovations off-site to pools, repairs, installations, things of that nature. It's a small family operation.
Mr. Lanza, did Mr. Grant occupy the house as well as use the commercial properties?
That I don't know. I believe Mr. Grant was a tenant on the commercial property, and the building, the home was occupied either by another tenant or by the owner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, I would call Mr. Clerico to start. Yes.
Linda, if you sit down, we'll hear you better. Okay.
So Robert Clark, with Bank Creek Engineering Associates, and a licensed professional.
Could you
engineer.
bring the microphone just a little closer, please?
And just talk a little bit slower.
A little bit slower, Bob, and clearer.
Just so you know, Bob, she'll hear you from there, but we won't. This is one of the worst acoustics of a municipal hearing room in Hunterdon County. You're in it.
Okay.
Did you want to make a note that Lindsay left the room to recuse herself?
Yes.
Oh, good point.
And,
Thank you.
and for the record, for Carlo Vital, Randy Block recused himself.
Yes, thank you.
So Robert Clark, Bank Creek Engineering, from Route 31 in Clinton Township, Hunter County. Licensed professional engineer. I also hold other licenses, but I'm here tonight to testify as a professional engineer.
Bob, you gotta go louder.
Okay. Robert Cleric.
There we go.
There we go. Robert Cleric, Van Cleef Engineering, a licensed professional engineer.
Mr. Perico, how long have you been so licensed?
About 50 years.
And during the course of that time, have you served any municipalities either as an engineer or for the boards?
Many in Hunterdon County and other counties.
And how many applications similar to this have you either reviewed or presented?
I wouldn't even venture a guess, probably over 1,000.
And are you currently certified as a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey?
I am.
I would move Mr. Clerico as an expert witness in engineering.
The chair accepts Mr. Clerico as an expert.
Mr. Clerico, could you generally describe the project for which we're here this evening?
Sure. The project is a piece of property, 9 Cool Road. It's about 500 feet east of Route 202 intersection. It's approximately slightly less than a 2-acre property, 1.97 acres. It contains an existing dwelling and it contains an existing commercial building that was previously mentioned. It was occupied at some point in time as a professional office. It may have had other tenants also, but that's the one we know of. The application before the board is to put an addition on the house. It's the property, I should say, is currently in an agricultural zone. This was previously in the adjoining business zone, the B2 zone, but it was been rezoned, is now part of the agricultural district. The applicant is proposing to put an addition on the existing house, which will result in some C setback variances we're not discussing tonight. And the applicant also proposes to reoccupy the existing commercial building in the back for their business operation, which you've heard explained as being a pool lining business. As part of the overall proposal, they also propose to put a garage on the property that would house some of their equipment.
The garage housing the equipment, that's the business equipment, not the residential house equipment, correct?
Correct, the business equipment. The house as proposed, again, you don't have architectural plans, but the house as proposed will have a 2-car garage. In laying this out, they're utilizing, the property has 2 existing driveways. One, it's an asphalt apron that goes into the west side of where the dwelling is. They would be using an expansion of that as the access into the garage. The property also has an existing stone parking lot in the southeast corner of the property. And they would be utilizing that as it exists for their operation. In conjunction with the proposed garage, it's a 900 square foot building. You'd have to make a little expansion of that existing driveway. They'd have to make an existing expansion of that gravel area to gain access into the garage. As part of the preliminary work we've done on the property, there's been a topo, there's been a boundary survey, just to satisfy ourselves that we'd be able to put a new septic system on the property. We've done soil testing for that purposes, and we've laid out a septic disposal system that would actually serve both buildings. The existing home has a septic tank behind the house, and it has a distribution field in the back of the property. We don't know the condition, we don't know the size, and we don't know the condition of those facilities. So we're not planning on utilizing them for any of the new construction. The commercial building, the existing commercial building, has some, we're not sure what it is. We think it's a seepage pit off the back of the building. Again, we're going to abandon that and connect this as, again, as part of a subsequent application for a site plan. We'll be proposing to connect them into a septic facility. And we're showing that at this time just to show that there's a feasibility of actually accomplishing this if the board accepts the premise of the use variance application.
Just a quick question for you. There's a white on with green lettering architectural drawing by Reagan Young England Botera. It shows the existing building, correct?
That was submitted as part of the application.
Right. So it shows some exterior renovations. Is that going to be the extent of the renovations of the existing building, what's shown on this, or are they going to be proposing at the time of site plan any other exterior modification?
I would let the applicant probably address that particular question, but our representation here is we're not expanding the building.
Well, no, the site plan says existing building.
Correct.
It says nothing's being done to it. This says something's being done to it.
Okay.
Mr. Clerico, could you go to your drawing and with more detail lay out the plan that you presented for this, prepared for this application? Can we mark that in the right hand?
This is the plan. It's a record if you want it marked.
Yeah,
as an
we don't
exhibit.
need that one, Mark, but the one on the right with the color
Yeah,
stuff
I'll
on
explain
it.
that one in a minute. What I was just testifying to was off the plan that you have before you. What is this going to be called?
A1, today's date.
He's got the lower right-hand corner. He knows what he's doing.
We've been doing this for 50 years.
Yep.
Him and Jackie started together.
Yeah, who started first, Jackie or Bob Clerico?
Jackie and I met years ago, which was before Judge Patel.
This exhibit is referenced as a site plan rendering. It carries a date of December 19th, 2023. It is a representation of the site and the site improvements as shown on the plan of record. It's a colored rendering, and as part of the colored rendering, it shows existing features, highlights existing features on the site. Notably, through the from the northwest to the eastern border of the site is the second Neshannock River that flows through the site. That's shaded in blue on this particular exhibit. The area behind the embankment of the river to the property line is a wetland area. There was a wetland report filed as part of the application. We also have highlighted on here, and it's on the drawings you have as part of the site plan. There are two buffers associated, riparian buffers associated with the stream that are part of the township ordinance. One is a 75-foot buffer that's it's prohibited for building construction within that area. The second is a 100-foot buffer, which is a limitation on
Disturbance.
disturbance. Thank you.
It's 75
Right.
is no disturbance, 100 is no structure.
Yes. What we've also added to this, and on this particular drawing, we've shaded in the existing part of the existing home that's going to be preserved and the addition that would be constructed as part of this proposal.
And what colors are those?
Those are blue. The existing are in a kind of a reddish color, and the additions are in a blue color. And this also shows the location of a 900 square foot commercial garage that would be built in conjunction with the commercial operation. We've also added to this plan as an exhibit, the flood delineation line, the floodplain flood hazard line that runs. There's a very steep embankment coming up on this property. So the flood hazard line, and this is as requested by your engineer. We put the one elevation 139 base flood elevation. We've also added the 2-foot additional elevation that would be associated with the new regulations. Again, Both of them are relatively close to each other because this is a very steep embankment. We also have on the plan a 50-foot riparian buffer that would be associated with the DEP regulations associated with this particular stream. There's a question of whether this stream would actually have a higher standard for a riparian buffer associated with what is apparently mapped the potential habitat for threatened and endangered species, and that would be a 150-foot buffer. Any approvals that this board might grant would be subject to the applicant obtaining permits from the DEP for any disturbances within those particular areas. Our initial presumption is that we're only bound by the 50-foot riparian buffer. But again, we would have to apply for a jurisdictional determination from DEP. And if they establish that there are threatened and endangered species, we would be then subject to the 150-foot buffer. Again, the existing property is served by an existing well, which is located off the proposed commercial garage that we're going to be constructing. And the parking area in front, we've shown it's gravel area, but we've shown how you could park 6 cars up in the front, 3 cars adjacent to the building, one of which presumably would have to be handicapped accessible. We also showed, again, for the residential structure, the driveway would come in and be serving to a 2-car garage and the ability to park 2 cars outside the garage.
Is the garage shown as a separate color in there?
No.
Mr. Clerico, what other work did you do on this project to prepare for your testimony?
Well, we've identified the zoning parameters. We've identified the existing conditions on the site that are associated with those various parameters as they exist today and as they would exist if this project was approved as constructed as proposed.
Did you prepare any aerial photographs?
We did.
Could we mark that A2 for identification in the right corner, please? A3. A3.
And after you mark them, just identify them both for the record.
Mr. Clerico, what is A2?
A2 is an aerial photograph on which we've outlined the boundaries of the property. We've also showed the boundary lines, a little hard to see on here in blue, property lines of adjoining properties. This particular exhibit is actually at scale, so it's 1 inch equals 50 feet. And it's dated, the exhibit is dated December 19, 2023.
The far left is depicted apparently a highway. What is that?
All right, so this exhibit is meant to show the relationship of the property to the adjoining business zone. This is Route 20231. Again, this is Cool Road running along the frontage of the property. On these drawings, north is straight up. So to the west of this, about 500 feet, about 500 feet to the west would be the intersection with Route 31. You have the plumbing supply business on the corner. You have the auto dealership next to that, going again to the north of Cool Road. And just to the south of the Cool Road is the shopping center.
If you go a little further east of Cool Road, you come to what's known as the Cool Corporation.
Use the other exhibit.
What's depicted in A4?
Yeah, A4 is,
We can't hear what you're saying, Mr. Lanza. Can you pull that microphone closer? to you?
Can you describe what's depicted in A3?
Let's identify A3 for the record first. It's an aerial photo with what?
A3 is the same aerial photograph at a larger scale, showing a larger area. It's the same aerial photograph. These are off the near maps. This is a March of 2023 depiction photograph. Again, same photograph, just at a smaller scale, showing the property in question, showing the businesses along Route 20231, and again showing a little bit further to the east of the property, where you have the properties owned by Cool and the Cool Corporation property located at the right side of the upper right side of the exhibit.
Is the Cool Corporation existing and located in the same zone as the subject property?
Yes.
So this property would be sandwiched in between two existing commercial properties?
Uses, yes.
Okay. Thank
The,
you.
the Cool Corporation, does that exist there by virtue of a use variance, or is that a lawfully created pre-existing non-conforming use?
I do not know.
I would say that's a pre-existing non-conforming use. That's been there for years. I mean, I
Jeff,
think it's
I'm gonna
Raritan
ask
Township
Jeff,
history.
he'll check the records and he'll confirm that, but that's probably my guess too, but
I believe it is. That it was a
Is the plumbing supply also in the same zone?
That's-
No.
No, different. Okay,
The-
thank you.
The B2 zone runs basically along the highway. B2 zone used to incorporate this particular property, but again, as part of a rezoning, it's now part of the A2 agricultural zone.
wait, did that rezoning included the Cool property?
The rezone changed the line of where the business zone was located. I believe it was still the same agricultural property. They just moved this particular property out of the business zone into the residential.
So you're saying the line moved to the left, the boundary line between the agricultural and the B2 moved to the left?
Correct. It's at one point in time, yes, the business zone incorporated this property. There was a zoning amendment that moved it basically to encompass the properties or the uses along the highway.
So the prior commercial use that you talked about, was that when it was zone B2?
I believe so, but I'd have to go
I
through the
get it.
chronology of the
Okay,
history.
I didn't realize that. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Clerico, in addition to your engineering and the drawings you prepared and your testimony tonight, did you also do a traffic impact study?
Yes, we were asked to do a traffic impact study as part of the application. I had that here someplace. As was described originally, this is essentially a small family, well, it's not a family business, but it's a
This
small,
traffic impact study is dated May 4th, 2023?
it is.
Need a copy of it? I got one.
No, I have one.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
So we have plenty of copies.
So essentially, we just looked at what their operation would be. Again, the two applicants would be residents of the house. They're also employees of the business. They have 3 additional employees. So we're talking relatively small numbers here, but their 3 employees would come in the morning, park their vehicles. There would be 4 commercial vehicles that would be going out from the site. One of them would be operated by the applicant himself. So we're talking relatively small trip generation figures of essentially 4 to 5 vehicles in either the peak hours. Actually goes up to 6 vehicles in the peak hour. But again, they're essentially coming in the morning, getting their equipment, whatnot, vehicles, and going out to job sites, coming back in the evening. There's an office area in this part of the building. When the applicant testifies, you'll hear that they basically they don't have customers coming to the site. They go to the customers' homes as part of their business operation, but they do have an office for their use in here. Another portion of the existing building in the back would be used for storage of materials and products associated with their business.
Right, as part of your report, did you do a trip generation analysis?
Yes,
And what was the result of that analysis?
it's essential. Well, yeah, it talks about the total number of trips in both the morning and PM peak hours. We're talking about talking about nine trips total in the 11, excuse me, in the AM peak, and also 11 in the PM situation.
And the off hours?
10 in the, 10 in 44 total in the, on a weekday trip generation.
Did you do an analysis and chart of the trip generation for the weekly, daily? In your last chart.
Yeah. That was the one that had the total of the 44 trips.
Entering 22, exiting
22 and 22, yeah.
And as a result of your analysis, what did you conclude?
Again, it's just a relatively small operation on a relatively rural road. That's in relatively close proximity to a state highway.
Now, did you review the report of the board engineer regarding your submissions?
We did, or I did.
And did you, can you review your responses to those issues that you raised?
Yes, we really didn't take exception to any of the comments, many of the comments or
First
fact.
of all, the report you're referring to. let's
I'm
identify-
looking at
Mr. Lanza,
the,
we're not hearing you down here again.
I'm sorry.
No, Bob,
Yes.
you're fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the board engineer's report is dated September 18th of this year.
Did you review that report?
Yes, as I indicated, we've incorporated on the exhibit some of the information the engineer was requesting, notably the two riparian buffer areas. I also neglected to mention that he requested, and we've documented on here.
Which document are you referring to? What exhibit number? Is it A1?
A1.
And what is your reference?
We were asked to show approximate location of site grading for land disturbance purposes, which we've incorporated into the exhibit. Keep in mind, this is a bifurcated application. So this is the use variance and perhaps at some point the C variance considerations of the proposal. Any approvals that would be granted by the board, we required as part of the second component of the process to come back with a site plan application, where we'd actually show detailed grading and details on the septic system and any other elements that are going with the site, if they happen to have lighting, landscaping, things of that nature. So the engineer.
Can you give us, Mr. Clerk, can you just give the board a sense of, you said you added some hypothetical grading limits there. Can you give the board a sense of how much disturbance you would anticipate being required? And if you could, can you split that disturbance into what would be within what I'll call the township stream corridor buffers and outside of the township stream corridor buffers, if you
You're
have
not
that?
handing out reduced copies of A1.
Correct. It would be probably easier for the board to see it.
Because you're gonna need some disturbance both inside the stream corridors and outside, correct?
Yes.
Hold up. Do they need the disturbance because of the commercial thing they're doing or because of the residential?
The commercial disturbance is within the stream corridor, and yes, the short answer is they need disturbance for both the residential and commercial. And for the removal of some of the existing septic systems.
We're anticipating that we're going to be abandoning in place the existing septic system. So we don't anticipate disturbance in that context with those components. We do anticipate that we are going to connect this building up to the septic system. So there's going to have to be not necessarily grading, but there's going to have to be a trench constructed to that particular area. So we're just incorporating it as some form of disturbance. Likewise, with the septic system, there's obviously going to be grading associated with the septic system. That is not falling within the township regulated area for prohibition about grading or disturbance. And likewise, the proposed building for the two-bay garage would fall within the parameter of a building prohibition. It's encroaching slightly into that. And the reason for that is that we had a choice here of trying to make this building essentially comply with the front yard setback. I also neglected to mention earlier that as part of this application, the property title here actually goes out into Cool Road. So when we talk about this being a 1.97 and change acre property, it's the gross area of the property. There's actually an existing right-of-way associated with this. And as part of the township's regulations, we're dedicating right-of-way to be 30 foot from the center line of the road. So there'll be a net lot area, and all your setbacks are going to be measured from that proposed roadway. So we're trying to push this building back to be compliant because this is an independent structure. So we have the ability to essentially put this wherever we could. By meeting the front yard setback criteria, we are encroaching into this 100-foot building prohibition under your local ordinance. So that would be one of the C variance release we need as part of this particular application. Again, the alternative to that would be to meet the setback for the stream, but then we'd be violating more the front yard setback.
So you've got a property of 1.97 acres, right? It's just under 2 acres.
Correct.
You lose about a tenth or so of an acre for the right-of-way dedication.
The numbers are on the
Indicate-
plan.
Yeah, I'm looking at your plan.
Right.
Your proposed net is 1.86 versus the 1.97. So you're a little over a tenth of an acre with respect to your right-of-way dedication.
Correct.
You've got the stream corridor buffers regulated by the township that essentially bisect the site at a diagonal. I'm looking at the property as a rectangular shape. Can you approximate how much of the, let's call it 2 acres? Can you approximate how much of the 2 acres is encumbered by the combination of the stream corridors, stream and wetlands, and how much is not encumbered?
Hey, hold on for a second. What's the lot size? It's 1.976.
Yes.
What's the minimum lot size for the zone?
2 acres.
2 acres.
We noted that as a
Undersized
pre-existing.
lot.
It's an undersized lot, which would be further exacerbated by the dedication.
Right. So is the question, how much of the property is on the side of the triangle?
What I'm getting at is how much of the 2 acres is unencumbered by stream corridors and other environmental constraints? How much developable land is on the 2 acre property? If this were a clean slate property?
And in that consideration, you want to consider the township's 2 buffer restrictions? as
Yeah,
part
just
of
the
that?
township. I'm ignoring the riparian zone at the
Right.
moment, just the
Just the
township
township.
corridors.
Well, I'll tell you in a second.
It's almost triangular, correct?
Triangle, yeah.
I get about 3/4 of an acre, a little more.
220. 220 by 3.
Mark, from the 75-foot township stream corridor line, all the way back to the wetlands, is that what you're talking about?
I'm really looking at the 100-foot.
The 100-foot line.
The 100-foot, because that's the restriction on structures.
Right.
So if I take the 100-foot line from there to the rear of the property, it's all encumbered one way or another.
Right. It's got to
So
be
I'm trying
almost
to-
2/3.
It's looking about,
8/10 of an acre.
yeah, it's a little, I came up with about conservatively 3/4 of an acre. So you've got 3/4 of an acre of a 2 acre lot, using round numbers. Even though it's slightly undersized, that's not encumbered by restrictions on structures. About half the existing structures and improvements on the property are within that restricted area. And you're kind of holding that same balance on proposed, correct? But, because half your garage is in the restricted area. half is
Essentially,
out.
again, the garage, we have the ability to move the garage. It was a choice between trying to meet the setback requirement or trying to meet.
But I assume if the board said they'd rather you violate the front yard than their environmental regulations, I assume you would do it,
We could
correct?
absolutely do it.
C variance is required for the
Yeah. As proposed, I was just trying to simplify it for the board in the sense that you've got about, of the existing improvements on the site, about half of the existing improvements are within restricted areas, half are out. And you're kind of keeping that balance with respect to your proposed development as proposed. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, yes.
Right,
Yes.
because I'm just looking at the size and shape of the blue shaded areas versus the totality of the blue and red.
Yeah,
right?
the entire existing commercial building that's there is within that restricted area.
And
And a
if,
good portion of the existing parking lot that's there is also in that restricted area.
right, and if based on a jurisdictional determination, based on a habitat, if the riparian zone were actually 150 feet as opposed to 50 feet, roughly cuts the unencumbered lands in half. You know, be a fair statement?
Yeah, well, he shows it. He has a dotted line.
Yeah, I'm just asking to quantify.
Oh,
it.
okay.
I'm just asking to quantify. So from an acre standpoint, we go from about 0.8 of an acre to a little under a half of an acre in that area. So I think I'm just trying to give the board some scale in terms of unencumbered properties here, because one of the things that you're asked to weigh in on here and I think you're gonna hear planning testimony in this, but one of the things that you're asked to evaluate here is it appropriate to have two principal uses on a property with this scale of encumbrances?
But how long has that building been there? The
Well,
main building,
that's
been
the
there
point I
for
was gonna
years.
make.
Right.
Yeah, but right now, that building was totally, they did a gut on it, didn't they?
I'm sorry?
They gutted the inside of that red existing building, correct?
Again, I'll let the applicant speak to that. Again, they haven't changed the external size of the building. What they've
understood.
done inside, I'm not sure.
And it's been there it was constructed presumably when the property was zoned B2, correct?
Yes, that would be my presumption.
Jeff, could you please repeat what you said? I didn't hear you. You said something about a variance C?
So what she asked Jeff to repeat, what Jeff said was currently the proposed garage actually does require a front yard setback variance.
So it needs two variants.
Because right now it's located 48 feet from the street, not 50. But what Bob's going to say is, geez, I could move it 2 feet and get rid of the front yard setback and just have it, need
Okay.
the environmental setback.
I can explain why that is. Because this is a garage, we have vehicles coming in and out. All we did was project the front, just so a vehicle would be running parallel with the existing building to enter and exit the garage. They wouldn't be backing into the existing building. So we could probably twist that. We could probably reorient. We could probably make that 50 exactly.
You can move that thing to the left, but then you'd have to cut down a tree. That was what you're going to say. There's a tree shown there, right?
Maybe not. I mean, we're talking feet here, so.
Correct. His point was that it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That's his presentation. Right.
But for purposes of history, I received from the zoning office, the zoning.
Can you do this sitting down so we can hear you better? It's just because it's the room. It's not you, it's the room.
No problem. We contacted the zoning office and received a zoning certificate of reoccupancy, which will answer some of the questions that were raised here. This is dated back in 1993 and does confirm that at that time, this was in the B2 commercial zone. I'm going to submit this document as part of our presentation so the board has it for reference, for a history reference for the property, and that it was used by Mr. Grant as his surveyor and engineering office at its present location, and there is a rough sketch in it. So you have that documentation and you can safely rely on the fact that it was in a B2 zone as Mr. Clerico has testified to. I don't know what you want to do with the.
Well, the board can take judicial notice of Jeff. Can you just, look, you can either mark him as exhibits or Jeff can have them scanned and have them emailed out to everyone. He has copies of all these. Oh, why don't you hand them out?
Great. But I was more, I do have this one page for it.
All right, so let's mark it as A4 if you want. Yeah, yeah, A4. So A4, once I get a copy,
Sir?
I'll tell Jackie what it is.
Yeah.
You have copies for the board professionals also, correct? Okay, so A4 is a zoning certificate of reoccupancy dated October 25, 1993. And in the upper right-hand corner, it's indicated that the zone is B2. And my advice to the board is you can take judicial notice of this document. It's a township zoning certificate of reoccupancy. And then attached to it is the application for a sign permit, which is not dated, and attached to that is signed by Mark Skirbitz, the name of blast from the past, who was the zoning officer back in 1988. This is dated April 29, 1988. And on the final page, there is a sketch of the Grant Associates Surveyor Engineers sign. And below that is a sketch of the property presumably as it existed in 1988, but it's not a survey. It's a sketch done by whoever did the sketch of the Grant Associate sign, and it was intended to show where the sign was going to be placed. But you're not relying on a lawfully created pre-existing non-conforming use. You're going for a D1 variance,
Yes,
correct?
this is just historical.
Right.
Because there were some questions about,
Yep.
about what the zone was and what it was used for, and we do have a record of that, and I thought that would be
I
appropriate for
agree.
the board to,
Yep.
board to have and refer to. Mr. Clerico, I believe that I'll pass you on to questions for the board and the professionals.
Any board members have questions for Mr. Clerico?
I don't.
You did say that you would be willing to move.
Roger, can't hear you. You got to talk
I'm
into the
sorry?
microphone.
You did say that you'd be willing to move the proposed garage, correct?
Yes, I explained why we put it where we put it, what we were trying to accomplish, so we could equally, violate the front yard setback more and better adhere to your restrictions associated with the street.
Mark and Jeff, which move would you prefer to see? The C variance violation or the violation of the existing setbacks for the riparian and the
township's environmental
Yep.
setbacks.
I'll go first. In this particular property, I would rather see a C variance and have the garage moved out of the stream corridor. And the only reason I say that is because, number one, I think it's important to preserve the structure restriction on the stream corridor.
Yeah.
And if the garage were shifted subtly closer to Cool Road to violate the setback, it would still remain behind the existing structures on the property as well. So you're not protruding out beyond what exists on the property today, and you'd be able to preserve the stream corridor buffer with respect to
And
restrictions.
not only that, if you moved it further south, he's going to have less disturbance for the driveway extension.
That's correct. Yes, less disturbance for the driveway extension. I see the limit of disturbance line that Mr. Clerico indicated, and I understand that that's probably mostly trenching, not grading, but it's likely that the application could respect the no grading corridor restriction, given its location relative to the existing structures. And if the garage were located southerly and violate the setback line, it's possible that they could honor and respect the no structures corridor buffer as well.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree, and I would like to add or question Mr. Clerico. There's another setback line on the plan. Conceptual site plan, there's actually two 50-yard setbacks.
We just put that in perspective. I showed the setback from the dedicated right of way. Also showed the setback from the existing right of ways, just to show we're accommodating the request to provide additional dedication. That moves the setback line, but that was more just for perspective.
Thank you. I got a question for Mr. Clerico. So the traffic, you calculated the traffic based on what the applicant told you about his business, correct?
Correct.
So what if the applicant ends up selling the property and another business comes in? Is there some sort of parking space calculation that from the ordinance that can be done for a commercial building to see how that would, fare? Because the board thinking down the road, let's assume they approve this and then it's sold and another business wants to come in, you're going to say, well, they have to come back here for approval, or will there be enough parking spaces, or is that going to be a problem? So what's in the ordinance that you could use as a guide for how many spaces? So how many square feet is the building shown in red, the existing building?
I'm going to just pose an objection to this line of questioning, because this is all speculation about what's going to happen in the future. I'll let Mr. Clerico answer it, but I think we're going far afield. This application is about this business. It's not about what's going to happen in the future and whether or not some prospective owner is going to come into this place and with a use and not get the proper site plan.
Well, with all due respect, I disagree with you. My advice to the board is it's absolutely a valid question, and the board should actually consider it when it considers the negative criterion.
Yeah, it was in discussions with the applicant early on, we were proposing this as if it's approved, we're proposing this as an owner. It's not really owner occupied, but whoever would be living in this house would be the operator of the business.
So
your question goes to.
But you're proposing a condition then that should be imposed that if the application is granted, the only business that could be run out of there is by someone who's living in that house?
That's how we're presenting this one. We assume, at least I assume, and I believe the applicant did too, that if it was approved, that's how it's being approved.
Well,
to answer your question about parking, again, it would be independent. The parking we're providing for the house is adequate for the house.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the house. I'm
I know.
specifically asking
And the
about.
parking we're providing for the business is adequate for the business. So we weren't really overlapping the
Yes,
two.
I'd like to know what the ordinance says. If you can compare it, how many square feet is the building indicated in red? And by analogy, for commercial use, what would the ordinance require for the number of parking spaces?
Give me a second.
Because actually, if it's less than that, you're going to need a variance at the time of site plan approval.
Okay, on the dwelling, let me just go through the whole thing. On the dwelling, we're required to have 2.5 spaces, and we actually have 3, 2 in the garage. And I listed it as 2 outside and 1 in the garage. It would actually be 2 in the garage and 1 outside.
That's true.
On the office and the warehouse combination, it's a 6-space requirement, and we're providing 9 spaces.
Okay, so
I thought you said the garage was going to be used for storage.
That's the new one.
The garage on a house I'm talking about.
There's a warehouse calculation, 6 spaces and 2 garage, total of 8 spaces.
Well, the proposed 900 square foot building is I'm looking at that as a garage. Vehicles will be parked in there. Commercial vehicles are part of the operation will be parked in that garage.
Okay, so commercial vehicles as part of the operation will not be parked outdoors?
That's how we're representing this, yeah.
Okay, just so you understand, anything you represent, if they grant it, it's going to be a condition of the approval. So when you say you're representing it that way, that's what's going to happen.
Some vehicles will be in, some will be out.
Okay, then you got to tell him that.
Well, the applicant will
Bob, did you hear what he said?
the applicant will testify to what exactly all their equipment and where it's going to go.
I understand, but we're looking at his traffic report that he prepared. You asked him about it. That's what I'm asking. Does it consider the proper number of parking spaces? That's what we're trying to do here. So do it again.
Okay. It's quite helpful to have testimony from the applicant, but be told that their actual commercial vehicles will be parked in the parking lot.
Take a look at your conceptual site plan. Lower right-hand corner, you have a parking
Correct.
calculation.
Right. So the requirement on the commercial side would be for 6 spaces.
And 6
Five.
spaces,
5 associated with the office component and 1 space associated, which would be the storage area of the building, which will, for classification purposes, considered a warehouse.
okay, and that's based on the ordinance standard?
Yes,
Huh?
yes.
Okay.
The ordinance standard does not separate individual uses. So if you have business use with some storage or manufacturing, it incorporates.
Oh, you have to count the entire square footage of the
Yeah.
building? All right, so do the calculation again, Bob, from the ordinance. How many spaces per square feet for a commercial building? And do the calculation and see what the ordinance would require.
It's actually a relatively small differential. We're doing the office at 1 per 4 spaces per 1,000, and the warehouse, actually, there's a bit of difference. Give me a second there, Bob.
Were you waiting for me?
No, he's, Bob Clerico's doing a calculation.
Calculation.
Would be 12 spaces.
Okay, hold on. Guys, listen to him. He just answered the
It
question.
would be 12 spaces.
So what, give us the calculation.
If you took the commercial building in the back and treated it at 4 spaces per 1,000 as general office, if that's how it's interpreted, there's a storage component. You have to treat the whole building as as office.
Right, and how, the square footage of that building is?
Total, well, it's 3,173 square feet.
Okay, so if you do that and you multiply it by 4 spaces for.
You come up with 12 points, you come up with 13 spaces.
13 spaces.
And the 3,173, that's inclusive of the 900 square foot proposed garage?
Now, the 900 square foot garage is just a storage building. Again, I was treating that as vehicles being
So,
parked
so
in
the
there.
existing building is 3,173
Correct.
square feet.
Okay, so. Jeff, how does a proposed garage get treated? I mean, it seems to me, just from logic, if it's, the purpose is to park vehicles, then it should count as parking spaces.
That's, yeah.
Right.
Okay, it shouldn't generate its own. So you're showing 9 spaces plus 2 in the building, you're showing 11 spaces. So unless you can come up with 2 more spaces, just so you understand, if the board grants this and you come back for site plan approval, you need a parking variance.
Now, we actually have additional area along the front of that building. We weren't, first of all, we didn't think we needed it for parking, so we weren't designated in that fashion.
Right, I'm saying, but if you have additional space, you can draw in some more spaces and comply with it. That's what you should do.
If we need to, we can certainly do that. I mean, the parking area is there. We just didn't designate it for that purpose because we didn't think we needed it.
But you have but is this blacktop or stone?
Stone.
Okay, so you also, at site plan, you're also going to need a site plan exception for having stone and not pavement, right?
If that's the ordinance requirement, yeah, it's, again, it's an existing parking lot. It's there.
Well, you're expanding it.
Well-
You're putting in blacktop.
We're putting, well, the only blacktop we were going to propose to put down is for the handicap space because that's required.
What about the new blacktop between the garage and the existing driveway? That's blacktop or is that
We were
stone?
proposing that just as an expansion of the stone. It was only meant to provide access up to the building itself. It's a grass area.
Put it
now.
this way, it's going to be up to Jeff's opinion, but Jeff is telling me that his opinion is going to be, you're going to need an exception. You got to, this is, when you come in with an application under the time of application law, The ordinance in effect at the time of the application applies. The ordinance right
Correct.
now requires
Correct.
pavement, curbs and all that. So you're going to be coming in, applying for exceptions at the time of site plan approval.
That would be our intent then.
I have several comments in my report that you'll also pertain to other site plan related, so sort of prelude to other site plan related elements, which are not under specific discussion at the
Yeah, I
moment.
have one more from, for you.
Yeah,
So going back to this Reagan Young England Butera thing. The floor plan for the existing building shows a waiting and reception area. Right?
Correct.
So obviously they're gonna have, before you said no customers, there are gonna be some customers coming to the site, right?
Again, I'll let the applicant testify. My understanding is that no, they would not have.
All right, so I'll ask him, why does the plan have a waiting and reception area? But I'm giving the applicant a heads up, I'm gonna ask you that. All right, I'm done.
and unless the board wants to, I wasn't intending to get into a lot of the site plan detail yet, since we're just talking about use variance, but does the applicant have a disposition on the shed at the northwest corner of the property?
It's the existing shed that we're going to leave it. It's about 175 square feet.
What's its purpose?
I'll let the applicants, I honestly don't know.
All right.
Okay. That's all I have at the moment.
I have one question. So I drove by the site today. I noticed I was not able to, I didn't access the site. It was just from Cool Road. There were some structures in the back that aren't included with this plan. Would that be, are you able to testify to that or?
This plan sort of reflects the existing structure. I'm not sure what you saw in the back of the property. You saw structures?
Structures to the west of the commercial building.
Listen, Mr. Clerco doesn't know you, that's the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a shed in the back.
I'm not talking about the shed. in
No.
the upper left-hand corner.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about right behind that building. You don't know.
No,
That's the applicant.
Every time I've been on the property with no structures there, so I'm not sure what you saw.
Jeff, you know what to do? We're gonna be continuing. Go out there and take pictures.
I'll take a picture.
Make them part of the file. We don't have any more questions for Mr. Clerico. I don't think anyone in the audience here on this application. Nope.
There's still members online.
Okay, ask about online.
Are there any questions of those that are online of this expert witness? None.
No.
So now might be the perfect time, since it's 9:55, to continue this application without need for further notice till what date? So let's ask Mr. Lanza, what do you want? Do you want to do something to try to get those C variances for the house? Do you want to get some elevations submitted?
Yeah, we'll have to do that. We'll
Okay.
Get some elevations and do whatever we need to do to give the board and the professionals.
Yeah, so put it this way, because you're going to want the board, if they grant this application, to approve them. So the MLUL rule is 10 days before. The board rules have a 21-day time before, so that the board experts can then review them and do a report that the board can get 10 days beforehand. So are you going to get the same architect, Reagan Young, England Butera, to do those elevations, or someone else? You know?
I do not know at this point. I'd have to confer with the client.
Okay, can you quickly ask them, because we figure out how much time?
Yeah, they'll be using him. That's their first choice.
So someone from there is not here, but you want to take a guess at how long it would take them? I know Christmas is coming up and then New Year's. So because what I'm trying to do is get you a hearing date so that you can get this thing submitted enough days beforehand so you can actually get heard and hopefully get
The
the case.
professionals need 21 days, so even the 18th would be a close call.
What do you have in February?
February 1st or February 15th?
What do you have scheduled on those 2 days?
Nothing.
Nothing.
All right. So February 1st?
Now, if you do February 1st, the 21 days is January 11th.
No, we're not going to be able to do it by January.
February
11th.
15th.
Okay.
That's the safest way to do it.
Mhm.
Okay, so the hearing on this application is going to be continued to February 15th. No need for further notice. And I thought I saw somewhere that they were deemed complete in November. No?
It's in the Redwell.
An extension?
I'm trying to figure out if you need one.
You have it if you need it.
Okay.
Deadline is February 29th, 2024.
Okay, so let's get an extension. If they're being heard February 15th.
I have a conflict not on the first.
Okay, let me, oh, you're the planner.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're batting cleanup. You're the key to the whole bifurcated D-variance case.
The first, that works.
Here, listen, I'll tell you what, since these are only elevations we're asking them for, will the board be willing to waive the 21-day rule and let them follow the MLUL 10-day rule?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the hearing on this application is going to be continued to February 1st with no need for further notice. And just to make sure, you're going to submit the elevations of the house. Do you want him to, Mr. Clerical, why don't you offline call up the engineer and the planner and see especially where they want you to move that garage? And again, they're not going to speak for the board, but again, if they recommend it,
We'll gladly do that, yeah.
Yeah, and then-
I've been committed to the office if that works. Or
yeah, and then
however they want to work.
resubmit as a plan 10 days before your site plan showing the new proposed garage location and parking, and make sure you show the number of parking spaces, even though we're not at the site plan, show them on the conceptual site plan that you're compliant with the parking spaces.
I have a favor to ask, or just so when you come back, I'm gonna want to understand the business a little bit. So I'm just letting you know. Pool liners to me are extremely heavy. Is there special equipment when it's delivered? I just want to
Yes.
understand that concept.
Yeah, we're gonna go
Yeah.
all into that. We have the photographs, we have everything that you're gonna need, so you can feel comfortable about what's gonna be
Thank you.
happening there.
Yeah, actually, and that's a good point, because you should also be aware that the township ordinance prohibits outdoor storage. So if these liners are going to be stored outdoors, you're going to need another use variance. So just make sure that you get.
Yeah, I
that all
just wanted to go
discussed.
quickly, so.
Yes, the only thing we anticipate that being outside would be some of our vehicles and
Yeah.
equipment. And most of the stuff, all that stuff will be stored. That's for that, in that big building.
That's what I assume, but I just wanted to.
No, I understand, but we plan to do that.
Yeah, and so the other thing is, Mr. Lanza, one more suggestion. Either you or Bob run that equipment that you want to store outside. I mean, vehicles, not a problem, but if it's equipment, just make sure you run it by these guys under the ordinance to make sure that's not a problem.
What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna give you a packet of photographs, and you can go through them. And I have it.
Okay. Can you call back?
John, you didn't finish if an extension was necessary, so I just want
Oh.
to make sure you want to finish that.
Thank you. When they extended to the end of February, so let's get an extension to the March 31st.
Granted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Noted.
Anything else? Anything else
That's it.
tonight? You good?
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Cynthia. You want to call back up? Fieldstone at Flemington?
I'd like to call back Fieldstone at Flemington, which is the OA case 19-2022. And that's block 40, lot 3. Counselor?
Why don't you come up to the central mic?
Or we kept you waiting. I was hoping we could fit you back in again.
No problem. We appreciate the effort.
Just to re-
So we're looking for the next available date. We've heard from Taylor, maybe January 18th, maybe February 1st. Either would be acceptable to us.
Hold on.
So I defer to the board.
Taylor, what's on the agenda January 1st?
January 1st, we have
No, it's not January 1st. It's-
fourth.
We have, what's on the agenda January 18th?
January 18th is Target. Flemington Family Partners and the Jankowski application.
No
So
way.
take it back.
The first, then. Is
No,
that possible?
January.
The fourth,
4th.
January 4th or the 18th, the
Okay,
4th,
but what's on the 4th? What's on the 4th?
2 residential applications.
So you'd be like, it would be like tonight, where he's gonna split them 3 hours and 3, an hour each. What about? Okay, that takes care of it. You don't want January 4th anyway. We want to try to get you a meeting when you can like almost have a whole meeting for yourself so you can finish off your application.
Right,
Yes?
right. I had said January 18th. We just determined that that wasn't going to happen because there's some applications on the agenda. I believe the next one after that is February 1st. We would also be amenable to February
Now,
1st.
February 1st, right now, there's one application on, which is the continuation of this one. And just to.
And we would accept that.
Okay, well, okay. Would that be the second, would theirs be the second
Yes.
application on? So can the board, does the board agree not to schedule any other applications for that date other than the 2?
Yes.
You have another one that has to be on?
I'm telling you.
Okay, so if these 2 are the only ones on that night, then you'll split the meeting.
Sure.
And hopefully, if they do what the board just asked them to do, hopefully they won't take up their whole half.
Sounds great.
Okay, so the announcement for the record is the hearing in Fieldstone at Flemington is going to be continued to
February 1st
at 7.
at 7 PM, 2024.
Right, with no need for further notice, but you will be, how do you, Mr. Chair, you want to put them first or them second on the agenda? They started first and you continued the other people second, but you didn't commit to the other guys a certain time. You
Yeah.
want to put them on first?
I think we should put them on first.
Okay, and they'll be first on the agenda at 7 PM.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Now, what's their time to decide?
They have until April 30th.
Okay, we're good shape. Okay.
Thank you for your time this evening. Happy
Thank you.
holidays,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
And see you in February.
Thank you.
One more thing before I ask for adjournment. I want to thank Mark Kateriniak for his phenomenal services this past year. I think some of you are aware of the fact that Mark is going to be taking over as the township engineer for East Brunswick. Congratulations, Mark. Best wishes. We are very sorry to see you go.
Yes. Yes, and I'm sorry to go as well too. And I don't know if everyone knows, but I was working with Roger, trying to work on an alternate plan to make that happen, but I'm committed to their zoning board, which meets the same night.
I make a suggestion. I think he actually deserves a round of applause.
Yeah. I don't know if that's ever happened, by the way, but you deserve it. You deserve it. I wish you could stay, but
Yeah, I know.
that, I know that hasn't happened since I've been here. I've been here a while.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
our loss, as
All
they
right.
say.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And happy holidays, everybody.
You as well.